Arizona Territory, 1877. The setting sun painted the sky crimson over the Dragoon Mountains as Quinn Dawson slumped forward in his saddle. Blood seeped through his tattered shirt where the arrow had pierced his shoulder before he'd managed to snap off the shaft. His horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Chance, plodded forward with weary determination, carrying its master deeper into Apache territory with each step. Quinn's vision blurred. At 25, he'd survived Reconstruction, Texas, 3 cattle drives and a brief stint as a deputy in Tombstone, but he reckoned this might be where his story ended. The thought didn't particularly trouble him. A man riding alone through life expected to die alone too. "Ain't nobody out here to miss you anyway," he muttered, coughing as the desert dust coated his parched throat. The philosophy had served him well these past years: no attachments, no disappointments. The frontier was no place for sentiment. A man survived by keeping his own counsel and his gun hand ready. His parents had taught him that lesson when cholera took them both during his 16th year, leaving him to fend for himself on their struggling East Texas farm until the bank foreclosed. Life since had been an endless string of temporary arrangements, ranch hand jobs that lasted until the season changed, towns he passed through but never settled in, people whose names he rarely bothered to remember. The arrow wound throbbed, and Quinn felt the fever rising within him. He'd been tracking a small band of rustlers who'd made off with cattle from the Barcy Ranch where he'd hired on 3 months back. The trail had led him into these mountains, where he'd stumbled upon an Apache hunting party instead. Whether they'd mistaken him for one of the rustlers or simply seen a white man trespassing on their territory didn't much matter now. Chance stumbled and Quinn nearly slid from the saddle. The ground below seemed to swim in his vision. "Steady, boy," he whispered, though his own grip on consciousness was tenuous at best. "Just a little further." He wasn't sure where further was exactly. The rustlers were long forgotten now. Survival was his only concern, though even that goal seemed increasingly unlikely as the fever climbed higher. Just as darkness threatened to claim him completely, Quinn glimpsed movement ahead, a flash of blue fabric against the reddish stone of a narrow canyon. He blinked hard, wondering if the fever had begun producing visions. The figure materialized more clearly, a woman, moving with careful grace among the rocks. She turned suddenly, spotting him, her dark eyes widening in surprise. For one lucid moment, Quinn registered her beauty. The high cheekbones, the cascade of straight black hair that reached past her shoulders, the deerskin dress adorned with intricate beadwork over a blue calico blouse that had caught his attention. Then the world tilted sideways as he slid from his saddle and crashed to the ground. The last thing Quinn saw before unconsciousness claimed him was the woman running toward him, concern etched across her face. His final thought was an oddly peaceful one. If death had come for him at last it wore a beautiful face. Water cool and blessed against his cracked lips. Quinn swallowed instinctively, then coughed as awareness slowly returned. "Drink slowly," a soft voice instructed in accented but clear English. "You are very weak." Quinn forced his eyes open, wincing at the dull ache in his shoulder. He lay on a pallet of soft furs inside what appeared to be a small wickiup. The conical shelter was sparsely furnished but meticulously kept. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the framework overhead, filling the space with an earthy, medicinal scent. The woman from the canyon knelt beside him, a wooden cup in her hands. Close up, he could see she was perhaps 20 years old, her skin smooth and copper-toned, her eyes so dark they appeared almost black in the dim light. She wore the same blue calico blouse beneath a deerskin dress decorated with geometric patterns in blue and white beadwork. "Where am I?" Quinn croaked, trying to prop himself up on his elbows before a sharp pain forced him back down. "You should not move," she said, placing a gentle but firm hand on his uninjured shoulder. "The poison is leaving your body, but you are still very sick." "Poison?" "The arrow that struck you was not meant to kill quickly. It was coated with a mixture my people sometimes use for hunting. It weakens the prey." Quinn processed this information sluggishly. "Your people, you're Apache." She nodded once. "I am Willow Feather of the Chiricahua. My father is Medicine Horse, a respected healer among our band. And you brought me here. Why? A small smile touched her lips. Would you have preferred I left you to die? Most Apache I've encountered would have, Quinn replied honestly. Perhaps you have encountered the wrong Apache, she said, her expression growing more serious. Or perhaps they encountered the wrong white man. Quinn couldn't argue with that assessment. Relations between settlers and the Apache had deteriorated into bloody conflict for years now. Neither side could claim much moral high ground anymore. My horse, he asked. Safe, I brought him to our camp as well, he is being tended to. Quinn tried to make sense of his situation. Your people. They're just letting you help a white man. Willow's gaze dropped briefly. My father's position affords me some freedom, and our small band has broken from the others. We seek peace, not war. But it would be better if you regained your strength quickly and moved on. Before Quinn could respond, the entrance flap was pushed aside, and an older Apache man entered, his face deeply lined from years under the harsh sun. He wore his long gray-streaked hair pulled back, and his bearing suggested natural authority. He is awake, the man observed in Apache. Yes, father, Willow replied in the same language before switching to English. This is my father, Medicine Horse. The older man studied Quinn with careful, evaluating eyes. The poison arrow would have killed you before sunrise if my daughter had not found you, he said in halting English. She has a gift for healing that surpasses even my own. Quinn nodded respectfully. I owe you both my life. Medicine Horse made a dismissive gesture. Life belongs to the Creator, not to men. We merely borrowed you from death for a while. He turned to his daughter and spoke rapidly in Apache. She nodded and responded, gesturing toward Quinn occasionally during their exchange. When Medicine Horse departed, Quinn asked, "What was that about?" Willow began grinding herbs in a small stone mortar. He says your wound is healing well, but the fever may return tonight. I am to prepare more medicine. She paused, looking at him directly. He also asked why I chose to help you, a stranger who rode armed into our territory. And what did you tell him? Her hands continued their methodical work with the herbs. That I saw something in your eyes when you looked at me before you fell, not hatred or fear, which is what we usually see from white men, just acceptance, as if you had made peace with your death. She tilted her head slightly. It seemed a shame for a young man to be so ready to die. Quinn had no response to that assessment. It cut too close to a truth he rarely acknowledged even to himself. Rest now, she said, apparently not expecting an answer. When the moon rises, I will bring more medicine. As she moved to leave, Quinn found his voice again. My name is Quinn Dawson. She paused at the entrance, the fading daylight silhouetting her slender form. Rest, Quinn Dawson. Tomorrow we will see if you still wish to live. With that enigmatic statement, she was gone, leaving Quinn alone with his thoughts and the strange realization that, for the first time in years, he was actually curious about what the next day might bring. The fever returned that night as Medicine Horse had predicted. Quinn drifted in and out of consciousness, his dreams filled with fragmented memories and distorted faces. Through the worst of it, he was aware of Willow's presence, her cool hands on his forehead, her soft voice speaking words he couldn't understand but found comforting nonetheless. Once, in a moment of clarity, he opened his eyes to find her watching him intently as she wrung out a cloth in a basin of water. You fight against the healing, she observed. Your body struggles, but your spirit, she placed the damp cloth on his forehead. Your spirit is not certain it wishes to stay. Talking nonsense, Quinn muttered, though her words disturbed him. The fever sometimes reveals truths we hide from ourselves, she replied simply. Sleep now, fight or surrender, but decide. By morning, the fever had broken. Quinn awoke feeling hollow and weak but clear-headed. Sunlight filtered through the smoke hole at the top of the wickiup, illuminating dust motes that danced in the beam. He managed to sit up, noting that his shoulder had been rebandaged with fresh herbs packed against the wound. The pain had subsided to a dull throb. Tentatively, he rotated the joint, finding it stiff but functional. The entrance flap moved, and Willow entered carrying a wooden bowl. Her hair was tied back today, accentuating her high cheekbones and the graceful line of her neck. She wore the same dress but had added a necklace of polished stones that caught the light. "You look better," she said, kneeling beside him and offering the bowl. "Can you eat?" The bowl contained a simple porridge mixed with berries. Quinn realized he was ravenously hungry. "Thank you," he said, accepting it gratefully. She watched him eat for a moment. "The poison has left your body. Your wound will heal now, though you should not use that arm too much for several days." "How long have I been here?" "This is the 3rd day." Quinn nearly choked on his porridge. 3 days. I need to get back. They'll think I'm dead or deserted." "The men you were tracking, they have crossed into Mexico by now." "How did you know I was tracking someone?" She gave him a look that suggested the answer was obvious. "You followed a trail that led you far from white settlements, and you carried supplies for many days. Also, you talk in your fever dreams." Quinn set the empty bowl aside. "I need to return to the ranch. My boss will be wondering what happened. You are not yet strong enough to travel. I've ridden in worse shape." Willow sighed. White men, always so eager to prove their strength by risking their lives foolishly. She stood up. "At least wait until tomorrow. One more day of rest will make the difference between reaching your destination or falling dead from your horse halfway there." Quinn knew she was right, though he was reluctant to admit it. "One more day," he conceded, "but I can't impose on your hospitality longer than that." A small smile touched her lips. "It is not hospitality that keeps you alive, Quinn Dawson. It is medicine and good fortune." She moved toward the entrance. "Rest today. If you feel strong enough, you may join our evening meal. My people are curious about the white man who sleeps in Medicine Horse's lodge." After she left, Quinn gradually tested his strength by standing and taking a few careful steps around the confined space. His legs felt wobbly, but they held his weight. His shoulder protested when he moved his arm too quickly, but the wound itself looked clean and was beginning to heal at the edges. By late afternoon, he felt steady enough to venture outside. Pulling on his shirt, which someone had cleaned and mended, he ducked through the entrance into the fading daylight. The Apache camp was smaller than he'd expected, perhaps 20 wickiups arranged in a rough circle within a secluded valley. Children played nearby, stopping to stare at him with undisguised curiosity. Women worked at cooking fires or scraped hides stretched on frames. A group of men sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, engaged in conversation that halted abruptly when they noticed him. Feeling distinctly out of place, Quinn was relieved when he spotted Willow approaching from a nearby stream, a clay water jar balanced expertly on her hip. Her face brightened with surprise when she saw him standing outside. "You should have called for help," she scolded gently, setting down her water jar. "What if you had fallen?" "Then I'd have gotten up again," Quinn replied with a slight smile. "I'm not completely helpless." She studied him critically. "No, but you are still weak. Come, sit here." She indicated a blanket spread in the shade near her father's wickiup. "My father will want to examine your wound before the evening meal." Quinn lowered himself carefully onto the blanket, watching as life in the small camp continued around him. "Your people seem very settled here," he observed. "I thought the Apache moved camp frequently." "We do usually," Willow replied, sitting beside him at a respectful distance. "But my father believes we should stay in one place through the summer months. He has been teaching several of the younger women about healing plants that grow in this valley. And the army lets you stay here." Her expression darkened slightly. "The army does not know we are here. This place is difficult to find if you do not know the way." She gave him a pointed look. "You stumbled upon us by accident, and only because you were following men who used this route deliberately to hide their trail. The rustlers knew about this place. They passed through these mountains twice before. They paid us with cattle for safe passage." She shrugged at his surprised expression. "We must eat, and it is better to trade than to raid." Quinn digested this information. Those men stole those cattle from innocent ranchers. And how did the ranchers acquire the land where those cattle graze? She countered, her dark eyes challenging him. Was it not taken from my people? Quinn had no answer for that. The moral complexities of frontier life rarely bothered him. He took jobs where he could find them and didn't ask too many questions. But Willow's direct challenge made him uncomfortable in a way he wasn't accustomed to. I'm just a hired hand, he said finally. The politics of land ownership is above my pay grade. She regarded him for a long moment. Is it? Every white man who carries a gun in our territory is making a political choice, whether he acknowledges it or not. Before Quinn could respond, Medicine Horse approached, effectively ending their conversation. The older man examined Quinn's wound with expert hands, nodding with satisfaction. You heal quickly, he pronounced. The Creator has more work for you, perhaps. Or maybe your daughter is just a skilled healer, Quinn suggested. Medicine Horse's weathered face creased in a brief smile. This too. He spoke rapidly to Willow and Apache, then walked away to join the men beneath the cottonwood tree. What did he say? Quinn asked. He says you may join us for the evening meal, but you should not strain yourself. And, she hesitated, he asked me to explain our ways to you, so you do not give offense unknowingly. The evening meal proved to be a simple but satisfying affair of venison stew, wild roots, and flatbread. Quinn sat beside Medicine Horse in a place of honor, aware of the curious and occasionally suspicious glances from the other Apache. Willow sat nearby, occasionally translating when her father spoke to Quinn. He learned that this small band had separated from the larger Chiricahua groups, seeking to avoid both the warpath some had chosen and the reservation life others had accepted. My father believes there is a middle way, Willow explained quietly as the meal progressed. He has seen too much bloodshed, but he also cannot accept being penned like cattle on reservation land. How long can you stay hidden here? Quinn asked. As long as the Creator wills it, she replied simply. Each season, each sunrise is a gift we do not question. After the meal, several elders gathered around a small fire. One began to sing in a low, melodic voice, while another accompanied him on a drum fashioned from rawhide stretched over a hollow log. They sing of ancient times, Willow told Quinn as they sat at the edge of the gathering. Of how our people came to be, of the sacred mountains and the spirits that dwell within them. Quinn watched the firelight play across her features, highlighting the curve of her cheek and the depth of her thoughtful eyes. Do you believe in spirits? He asked. Do you not? She countered. Your people speak of ghosts and angels. Are these not spirits by another name? I suppose, Quinn admitted, though I've never given it much thought. I tend to believe in what I can see and touch. She smiled softly. And yet you cannot see the wind, only its effects. You cannot touch pain, yet you know it exists. Her hand gestured toward the mountains looming in the darkness beyond the camp. The world is full of unseen forces, Quinn Dawson. Wisdom lies in recognizing our blindness, not in denying what we cannot see. Her words stayed with Quinn long after he had retired to his pallet in Medicine Horse's wickiup. For years he had moved through life guided by pragmatism alone. Survive today, worry about tomorrow when it comes, form no attachments that might slow him down. Yet here in this hidden valley, listening to the night sounds filtering through the wickiup walls, he felt something shifting within him, like ground giving way beneath his feet. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, his dreams were filled not with the usual fragments of violence and loss, but with Willow's face illuminated by firelight as she spoke of unseen forces and ancient wisdom. Morning brought clarity and an unexpected reluctance to leave. Quinn's strength had largely returned, and his wound, while still tender, no longer hindered his movements significantly. By rights, he should saddle Chance and ride back to the Barcy Ranch immediately, yet he found himself accepting Medicine Horse's invitation to remain another day. The journey to your people's settlement is long, the older man said as they shared a breakfast of dried meat and pine nut porridge. One more day of healing will serve you well. Quinn suspected the Apache healer saw more than he let on, perhaps sensing Quinn's uncharacteristic hesitation to depart. Whatever the reason, he felt relieved at the temporary reprieve. Willow seemed pleased by his decision to stay, though she masked it with practical considerations. "Your dressing should be changed once more before you travel," she said, kneeling beside him to examine his shoulder. "And your horse deserves another day of rest as well." Her fingers were gentle as she applied a fresh poultice to his wound. Quinn found himself acutely aware of her proximity, the soft sound of her breathing, the faint herbal scent that clung to her hair. "Your father mentioned you might show me around the valley today," he said, trying to distract himself from these unsettling observations. "Yes, if you feel strong enough to walk. There is a place nearby where healing plants grow abundantly. I go there often to gather what we need." After breakfast, they set out together, following a narrow trail that wound through scrub brush and rocky outcroppings. Quinn walked carefully, still mindful of his recovering strength, while Willow moved with the sure-footed grace of someone intimately familiar with the landscape. "You said your band broke from the others," Quinn remarked as they climbed a gentle slope. "Doesn't that put you in a vulnerable position? There's safety in numbers out here." Willow considered his question before answering. "There is also danger in numbers. Large groups are easily spotted. They require more food, more water." She gestured to the sparse vegetation around them. "This land cannot support many people in one place, but more than that, my father believes that the path of constant warfare can only lead to destruction for our people." "Not all white settlers want conflict," Quinn pointed out. "Perhaps, but when one group takes what belongs to another, conflict is inevitable." She gave him a sidelong glance. "Would you peacefully accept someone claiming your home as their own?" "I don't have a home," Quinn replied automatically. "Haven't for years." Willow stopped walking, studying him with those penetrating dark eyes. "Everyone belongs somewhere, Quinn Dawson. If you have not found that place, perhaps you have not looked with the right eyes." The trail opened onto a small, hidden meadow, where a spring created a patch of surprising fertility. Wildflowers dotted the grass, and several types of plants that Quinn didn't recognize grew in abundance near the water source. "This is my special place," Willow said, her expression softening as she surveyed the meadow. "Few others come here. My father says the spirits blessed this ground with healing powers." Quinn watched as she knelt beside a plant with delicate white flowers, her fingers gently examining the leaves. There was something deeply compelling about her connection to this place, a sureness of belonging that Quinn had never experienced. "These flowers can draw poison from wounds," she explained, carefully harvesting several plants and placing them in the small basket she carried. "They saved your life, along with other medicines my father has taught me to prepare." They spent the morning in the meadow, with Willow identifying various plants and explaining their medicinal properties. Quinn found himself genuinely interested, asking questions about preparation methods and listening intently to her answers. As the sun climbed higher, they rested in the shade of a gnarled juniper tree near the spring. Willow shared dried berries from her basket, the sweet tart flavor bursting in Quinn's mouth. "Why did you become a cowboy?" she asked suddenly, fixing him with her curious gaze. The question caught him off guard. Few people ever asked him anything about his past or his choices. "It wasn't exactly planned," he admitted. "After my parents died, I worked odd jobs until I was old enough to hire on with a cattle outfit. Turns out I was good with horses and didn't mind the hard work." He shrugged. "A man has to earn his keep somehow." "But you do not stay in one place. You are not like the ranchers who build homes and fences." "No," Quinn agreed. "Never saw much point in settling down. The open country suits me better." "In this way you are more like my people than you may realize," Willow observed with a small smile. "We understand that a man cannot own the land. He can only travel upon it for a time." The comparison had never occurred to Quinn before. He had always viewed the Apache and other tribes as fundamentally different from himself, separated by an unbridgeable cultural divide. Yet Willow's simple observation revealed a connection he had never considered. "I suppose that's true," he acknowledged, "though I doubt many of your people would appreciate the comparison." "Many of my people have good reason to distrust white men," she said matter-of-factly. Just as many white men have been taught to fear the Apache. Fear and distrust are easy seeds to plant but difficult weeds to remove once they have taken root. They fell silent for a moment, the only sounds the gentle burbling of the spring and the occasional call of a bird overhead. "Why did you really save me?" Quinn asked finally, voicing the question that had lingered in his mind since he first regained consciousness. "The truth." Willow's gaze dropped to her hands, which were methodically sorting through the plants in her basket. For a moment Quinn thought she might not answer. "3 winters ago," she began quietly, "my younger brother fell ill with fever. My father was away, trading with another band. I tried every medicine I knew, but the sickness was too strong." Her voice remained steady, but Quinn could hear the undercurrent of old pain. "A white doctor passed near our camp. Some of our men had seen him treating settlers in the valley to the south. I went to him, begged him to help my brother." She looked up, meeting Quinn's eyes directly. He refused. Said he would not treat savage children when good Christian families needed his skills. Her expression remained composed, but her eyes flashed with remembered anger. "My brother died that night. He was 11 winters old." "I'm sorry," Quinn said, feeling the inadequacy of the words. "After that, I decided I would never turn away from someone in need of healing, no matter who they were or what they believed." She resumed sorting her plants with deliberate movements. "That is why I helped you, because I will not become what I despise." The raw honesty of her answer humbled Quinn. He had expected something simpler, compassion, perhaps, or even calculation. Instead, she had revealed a moral conviction born of personal tragedy that put his own aimless existence to shame. "Your brother was fortunate to have such a sister," he said finally. "It was not enough to save him," Willow replied, but her expression softened slightly. "Come, we should return before the day grows too hot." As they walked back toward the camp, Quinn found himself watching Willow with new eyes. Her strength wasn't just in her ability to survive in this harsh landscape, but in her capacity to transform personal suffering into something meaningful, a code of conduct that transcended the bitter divisions between their peoples. For the first time in years, Quinn felt something like admiration stirring within him. Not merely appreciation for a beautiful woman, though she was certainly that, but respect for a soul that seemed to possess a clarity of purpose he had never managed to find. The realization was as unsettling as it was unexpected. That evening, as the camp settled into its nighttime routines, Quinn sat outside Medicine Horse's wickiup, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. His thoughts remained tangled around Willow and the strange sense of connection he felt developing between them, a connection that would be severed tomorrow when he rode back to the world he belonged to. The prospect of returning to his former life suddenly seemed less appealing than it should have. At the Barcy, he was just another hired hand, competent enough to be trusted with tracking rustlers, but ultimately replaceable. No one there would have searched very hard for him after he went missing. They would have assumed he'd either been killed or had decided to move on, as drifting cowboys often did. "Your thoughts travel far tonight." Medicine Horse's voice broke into his reverie as the older man lowered himself to sit beside Quinn. Despite his age, the Apache healer moved with remarkable fluidity. "Just thinking about heading back tomorrow," Quinn replied. Medicine Horse nodded thoughtfully. "The path that takes us away from a place can sometimes reveal more than the one that brought us there." Before Quinn could puzzle out the meaning of this cryptic statement, Willow approached, carrying 2 clay cups. She handed one to her father and the other to Quinn. "Pine needle tea," she explained. "It will help you sleep and strengthen your body for tomorrow's journey." The tea was aromatic and slightly resinous, unlike anything Quinn had tasted before. He sipped it carefully, aware of both Apache watching him with varying degrees of amusement. "It is an acquired taste for those not raised with it," Medicine Horse said with a hint of a smile. As they sat together in companionable silence, an elderly Apache man approached, speaking rapidly to Medicine Horse. The healer's expression grew serious as he listened, then he replied in equally rapid Apache. The old man glanced at Quinn suspiciously before walking away. "Is something wrong?" Quinn asked, noting the sudden tension. Medicine Horse and Willow exchanged a glance before the older man answered. 2 riders were spotted near the valley entrance. White men, heavily armed, they appear to be tracking something or someone. Quinn immediately understood the implications. They might be from the Barsi looking for me, or they could be the cattle thieves you were pursuing, Willow finished for him, returning to ensure you cannot report their route. Either way, my presence here puts your people at risk, Quinn said, setting down his cup. I should leave immediately. Medicine Horse raised a hand. Not in darkness. The paths are treacherous and your wound could reopen if you fell. He stood up with decision. We will post watchers tonight. If these men approach our camp, we will deal with them. You will leave at first light. After the healer had gone to organize the watch, Willow remained beside Quinn, her face troubled in the fading firelight. I'm sorry, Quinn said quietly. The last thing I wanted was to bring trouble to your people after the kindness you've shown me. You did not ask to be wounded and left for dead in our territory, she replied pragmatically. But if these men are searching for you specifically, it would be best if they found you far from here. Agreed, Quinn paused, suddenly reluctant to say what needed to be said. Willow, I want you to know how grateful I am for what you did. Not many would have taken the risk. She studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes reflecting the distant campfires. What will you do when you return to your people? The question caught him off guard. I suppose I'll finish out my contract at the Barsi, then move on when winter comes. That's usually how it goes. Always moving, never staying, she observed. Is that the life you want, Quinn Dawson? Before he could formulate an answer, a commotion rose from the far side of the camp. Voices called out in Apache, the tone urgent but controlled. Willow stood quickly. Stay here, she instructed, disappearing into the gathering darkness toward the source of the disturbance. Quinn ignored her directive, rising to follow at a discreet distance. His instincts told him that whatever was happening involved him directly, and he wouldn't cower in a wickiup while others faced potential danger on his behalf. Near the edge of the camp, a small group had gathered, including Medicine Horse and several of the men Quinn had seen beneath the cottonwood earlier. They surrounded 2 figures, Apache scouts, judging by their appearance and the fact they carried no visible weapons into camp. The scouts reported rapidly in Apache, gesturing occasionally toward the surrounding mountains. Quinn couldn't understand the words, but the reaction they provoked was clear enough. The assembled Apache grew increasingly tense, with several hands moving to rest on knives or other weapons. Willow noticed Quinn's approach and moved to intercept him. What's happening? He asked quietly. The scouts have been watching the riders, she explained in a low voice. There are 4 men, not 2 as first reported. They are definitely searching for something, examining tracks and moving methodically through the canyons that lead to this valley. Did the scouts recognize them? Willow hesitated. One man they described matches the foreman from your ranch, a big man with a red beard. Harlan, Quinn confirmed, feeling a mixture of relief and concern. Harlan Buckley was the Barsi's hard-nosed foreman, known for his tracking skills and uncompromising attitude toward rustlers and Indians. If it's Harlan, they're looking for me, but he's not a man to approach an Apache camp peacefully. The scouts say they are heavily armed and moving with purpose. They will likely discover our location by midday tomorrow. Quinn considered their options quickly. I need to go meet them before they get close to your camp. If I can intercept them in the canyons, I can lead them away from here. In darkness, the terrain is treacherous even for those who know it well. First light then, Quinn conceded. But I'll need to move quickly. Medicine Horse approached, having concluded his discussion with the scouts. These men are searching with determination, he said grimly. If they are your friends, they are friends who bring danger to my people. They're not exactly friends, Quinn admitted. The foreman is a hard man who's lost cowboys to Apache raids before. He wouldn't distinguish between your band and any other. The older man nodded as if this confirmed his assessment. Then we must ensure they do not find our camp. We will break camp at dawn and move deeper into the mountains. while you ride to meet these men and lead them away." "I'm sorry to cause such disruption," Quinn said sincerely. Medicine Horse's weathered face remained impassive. "The Apache have always moved with the wind and the seasons. One more journey is not a hardship." He glanced at his daughter, adding something in Apache that made her expression tighten before she nodded reluctantly. After the healer had moved away to oversee preparations, Quinn turned to Willow. "What did he say to you?" She hesitated before answering. "He said I should guide you through the canyons to intercept these men. I know paths that will allow us to reach them before they come too close to our current camp." "Us?" Quinn raised an eyebrow. "That seems unnecessarily risky for you." "The risk would be greater if you became lost in the canyons, or if your wound reopened while you were alone," she countered pragmatically. "I will guide you to a meeting point, then return to my people." Her logic was sound, but Quinn felt uneasy about placing her in potential danger. These men won't hesitate to shoot if they see an Apache. "Then they will not see me," she replied simply. "I have moved unseen through these mountains since childhood. Your white men are not so difficult to avoid." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Quinn found himself smiling at her confidence. "I don't doubt it." As they returned to Medicine Horse's wickiup to prepare for the morning departure, Quinn felt a conflicting swirl of emotions. Concern for the safety of the Apache band that had helped him, determination to prevent violence if possible, and beneath it all, an unexpected ache at the thought of saying goodbye to Willow. That night, as he lay on his pallet listening to the quiet preparations throughout the camp, Quinn admitted to himself what he had been avoiding all day. In just a few short days, this Apache woman had awakened something in him that he'd thought long dead, a capacity for connection, for seeing beyond his next meal or his next paycheck to something more meaningful. Tomorrow he would return to his world, and she to hers. The bitter reality of frontier life would reassert itself, and this brief interlude would fade into memory. It was the only possible outcome, yet the prospect filled him with a hollowness he hadn't anticipated. Sleep proved elusive, and when it finally came, his dreams were troubled by images of pursuit and separation, with Willow always just beyond his reach. Dawn broke in a wash of pale gold across the eastern sky as Quinn saddled Chance. The buckskin seemed refreshed after several days of rest, nickering softly and nudging Quinn's shoulder in greeting. The Apache camp was a hive of controlled activity, with wickiups being dismantled efficiently, and belongings packed onto travois or the backs of the few horses the band possessed. They had clearly done this many times before, each person knowing their role in the swift decampment. Medicine Horse approached as Quinn finished checking his cinch. The healer carried a small leather pouch, which he handed to Quinn without ceremony. "Medicine for your wound," he explained. "Apply it morning and night until the skin has fully healed." "Thank you," Quinn said, tucking the pouch into his saddlebag, "for this and for everything else. I owe you my life." The older man inclined his head slightly. "Life is a gift that passes through many hands, Quinn Dawson. Use yours wisely." He glanced toward where Willow was securing a blanket roll to a sturdy pinto pony. "My daughter will show you the fastest path through the canyons. Listen to her guidance." Before Quinn could respond, Medicine Horse added in a lower voice, "She has a strong spirit, but her heart sees beyond the differences that blind many. This can be both wisdom and danger in these troubled times." The warning was gentle but clear. Quinn nodded his understanding. "I won't let any harm come to her." "See that you don't," the healer replied, then turned away to oversee the final preparations for his people's departure. Willow approached leading her pony. She had changed into buckskin leggings and a plain cotton shirt, practical attire for riding. Her long black hair was braided tightly, and she carried a rifle in a saddle scabbard, a reminder that despite her healing abilities, she was also a woman of the frontier, prepared for its dangers. "We should leave now," she said without preamble. "The scouts report your men are already moving again. They passed the night in the lower canyon." Quinn mounted Chance, adjusting his hat against the rising sun. "Lead the way." They rode out ahead of the main band, following a narrow trail that wound upward through rocky terrain. Willow set a brisk but measured pace, clearly mindful of Quinn's recent injury. She rode with the relaxed confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime on horseback, her slender form moving in perfect harmony with her mount. The morning air was still cool, though Quinn knew the heat would build quickly as the sun climbed higher. The landscape around them was deceptively beautiful, stark red cliffs rising above juniper-studded slopes, the distant mountains hazy in the morning light. It was hard to reconcile such tranquility with the tension of their mission. After they had ridden for perhaps an hour, Willow guided them into a narrow side canyon, then dismounted at a point where the walls widened slightly to create a small, sheltered area beside a dry creek bed. "We will wait here," she said, looping her pony's reins around a juniper branch. "The men you seek will pass through the main canyon below. From here we can see them before they see us." Quinn dismounted carefully, his shoulder protesting slightly but manageable. "How can you be sure they'll come this way?" "There are only 3 passages through these mountains that men on horseback can navigate easily. The scouts report they are following the central one." She pointed to a rocky outcrop. "From there, you will be able to see the canyon floor." They climbed to the vantage point, moving carefully to avoid dislodging loose stones that might betray their position. The outcrop provided an excellent view of the main canyon below, which curved gently between towering red rock walls. "Now we wait," Willow said, settling behind a large boulder that shielded them from view while allowing them to observe the canyon. The sun climbed higher as they maintained their vigil. Quinn found himself acutely aware of Willow's proximity as they shared the limited shade of their rocky shelter. Neither spoke much, both scanning the canyon below for any sign of movement. "Your people will be well away by now?" Quinn asked after a while. Willow nodded. "They know where to re-establish camp. It is a place we have used before, deeper in the mountains where white men rarely venture." "Will you be able to find them again after this is done?" "Of course, I have traveled these mountains since I was a child." She gave him a sidelong glance. "You are concerned for me." Quinn shrugged, then winced slightly as the motion pulled at his healing wound. "Seems only fair, considering how concerned you've been for me." A small smile touched her lips, but before she could respond, she stiffened, her gaze fixed on the canyon below. "There," she whispered, pointing. Quinn followed her gesture and saw them, 4 riders moving at a measured pace along the canyon floor. Even at this distance, he recognized Harlan Buckley's distinctive build and the way he sat his horse. With him were 3 cowboys from the Barcy, all men Quinn knew by sight if not particularly well. "That's them," he confirmed. "The big one in front is Harlan, the foreman." Willow studied the approaching riders with narrowed eyes. They move like men who expect trouble. See how they watch the canyon walls, how the rear rider keeps looking behind them. These are not men on a friendly search. Quinn couldn't deny her assessment. Harlan and his men were riding in a defensive formation, rifles at the ready, clearly anticipating potential ambush. It wasn't surprising given they were in Apache territory, but it confirmed that any unexpected encounter could turn violent quickly. "I need to approach them carefully," Quinn said, thinking aloud. "If I just ride down there, they might shoot before they recognize me." "Call to them from a distance," Willow suggested. "Let them hear your voice before they see you." It was sound advice. Quinn nodded, then turned to her. "This is where we part ways. You should head back to your people while I deal with Harlan." Willow's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in her dark eyes. A momentary hesitation that Quinn might have missed if he hadn't been watching her so intently. "That would be wisest," she agreed after a beat. "Once you have rejoined your men, ride east out of the mountains. That path will not cross with my peoples." The moment stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Quinn found himself searching for words that wouldn't come, something to acknowledge the connection that had formed between them, something to express his gratitude that went beyond the simple fact of his rescued life. "Willow, They will pass below us soon," she interrupted, her tone suddenly brisk and practical. "You should go now if you wish to intercept them at the canyon bend ahead." It offers better visibility, and they will have more warning of your approach. Quinn recognized the deliberate shift, the careful withdrawal behind a wall of practicality. Perhaps it was better this way, cleaner, with no messy sentiments to complicate an already impossible situation. "You're right," he said, moving back from the outcrop. "Thank you for your guidance, and please thank your father again for me." She nodded once, her face composed. "May your journey be safe, Quinn Dawson." "And yours," he replied, feeling the inadequacy of the words. They descended from the outcrop and returned to where the horses waited. Quinn mounted Chance, adjusting his gun belt and checking that the medicine pouch was secure in his saddlebag. When he looked down, Willow was standing beside his stirrup, her hand resting lightly on his leg. "The world may say our paths should never have crossed," she said quietly, looking up at him with those penetrating dark eyes. "But I do not regret that they did." Before Quinn could respond, she stepped back, her expression once again composed and distant. With a final nod, he turned Chance and rode toward the trail that would take him down to the main canyon, feeling Willow's gaze on his back long after he'd passed out of sight. Quinn positioned himself at the bend in the canyon where the trail widened slightly, dismounting and standing in plain view beside Chance. He removed his hat, hoping the gesture would make him more recognizable at a distance. When Harlan and his men appeared around the curve of the canyon wall, Quinn raised his arm and called out, "Harlan, it's Dawson." The riders instantly raised their rifles, reacting to the unexpected voice. Quinn remained perfectly still, one hand held high, the other resting visibly on Chance's saddle. "Dawson," Harlan's gruff voice echoed against the canyon walls. "That really you?" "It's me," Quinn confirmed. "You can lower those rifles." "I'm alone." Harlan signaled to his men and they cautiously lowered their weapons, though Quinn noted they didn't return them to their scabbards. The foreman urged his horse forward, studying Quinn suspiciously as he approached. "We've been tracking you for 3 days, Harlan said when he was close enough for normal conversation. "Found your blood on some rocks back yonder and figured you'd either been killed or taken." His eyes narrowed. "You look mighty healthy for a man who left a blood trail." Quinn kept his explanation simple and as truthful as circumstances allowed. "Took an arrow in the shoulder from a hunting party. Managed to get away but lost too much blood to keep going. Holed up in a cave to recover my strength." Harlan's eyes flicked to Quinn's shoulder, then back to his face. The foreman was a hard man but not a stupid one. Quinn could see him weighing the explanation, looking for inconsistencies. "Must have been some recovery," Harlan observed. "That shirt's cleaner than when you left the ranch." Quinn had to think quickly. "Found a stream. Figured I should clean up the wound and my clothes if I was going to avoid infection." The other cowboys had moved up behind Harlan, their expressions ranging from relief to lingering suspicion. "Did you catch those rustlers?" asked Pete, the youngest of the group. Quinn shook his head. "Lost their trail after I was wounded. Staying alive became my priority." Harlan grunted. "Well, you're a sight more fortunate than most who take Apache arrows. Must not have been a war party, or you'd be minus your scalp." The casual brutality of the remark reminded Quinn sharply of the world he was returning to. A world where men like Harlan saw all Apache as enemies to be feared and hated, rather than people with their own hopes and struggles. "Guess it wasn't my time," Quinn said neutrally, reaching for Chance's reins. "We should head back. I could use a proper meal and a real bed." Harlan's gaze lingered on him a moment longer, still assessing, still not entirely convinced. But whatever doubts the foreman harbored, he apparently decided they weren't worth pursuing further. "Mount up then," he ordered. "We've wasted enough time in Apache country. I want to be well clear of these mountains by nightfall." As Quinn swung into the saddle, a movement caught his eye, a flash of color high on the canyon wall where he knew Willow had a clear view of the encounter. His heart jumped, but he kept his expression carefully neutral, not daring to look directly toward the spot. If Willow was still watching, the last thing he wanted was to draw Harlan's attention in her direction. The small party turned their horses and began retracing their path through the canyon. Quinn rode beside Pete, letting Harlan lead. As they rounded the bend, he risked a quick glance back toward the high rocks where he'd thought he'd seen movement. The canyon wall stood empty and silent in the midday sun. "You sure you're all right, Dawson?" Pete asked, noticing his distraction. "You seem different somehow." Quinn forced his attention back to his companions. "Nearly dying changes a man's perspective," he said, surprising himself with the truth of the statement. Pete nodded sagely, though Quinn doubted the young cowboy had ever faced his own mortality in any meaningful way. "Boss was pretty set on finding you," he offered. "Said you were too good with horses to ride off without knowing for sure." The assessment was purely practical, Quinn's value measured in his skills rather than any personal connection, but it was honest enough. The Barcy was a business, not a family, and Quinn had never expected anything different. So why did it suddenly feel so hollow? They rode steadily through the day, emerging from the mountains onto the rolling grasslands that stretched toward the distant Barcy. Quinn found himself repeatedly glancing back at the receding peaks, each mile increasing the sense that he was leaving something vital behind. By nightfall, they had put significant distance between themselves and the mountains. They made camp beside a small creek, the familiar routine of frontier life reasserting itself as they tended the horses, built a fire, and prepared a simple meal of beans, bacon, and coffee. As the others settled in with their tin plates, Harlan approached where Quinn sat slightly apart from the group. "Something you want to tell me, Dawson?" the foreman asked without preamble, his voice pitched low enough that the others couldn't hear. Quinn met his gaze evenly. "About what?" "About how a man survives an Apache arrow with nothing but a cave and a stream to help him." Harlan's red beard caught the firelight, giving his face a demonic cast. "I've been riding these territories for 20 years. Men don't just walk away from Apache arrows unless someone helps them." Quinn kept his expression carefully neutral. "I got lucky. The arrow went clean through, missed anything vital." "And that shirt," Harlan persisted, "mended neat as you please, right where an arrow hole would be." Quinn hadn't considered that detail. He silently cursed himself for the oversight. "Like I said, I had time to recover, did what I could to patch things up." Harlan studied him for a long moment, his eyes hard in the firelight. "I lost my brother to Apache back in '71. Took 2 days to die after they were done with him." He spat into the fire. "So you understand why I find your miraculous recovery a bit hard to swallow." Quinn realized that nothing he said would fully satisfy Harlan's suspicions. The foreman had too much experience and too much personal hatred to be easily misled. "Believe what you want," Quinn said finally. "I'm alive, I'm heading back to finish my contract with the Barcy, and that's all that matters." Harlan continued to stare at him, then gave a slight nod. "Fair enough, but I'll be watching you, Dawson. A man who keeps secrets eventually spills them." With that, he returned to the fire, leaving Quinn alone with his thoughts. That night, as the others slept, Quinn found himself wide awake, staring at the stars overhead. They were the same stars that shone over Willow and her people, now hidden somewhere deep in the mountains behind them. The thought brought both comfort and an unexpected ache. He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew the small medicine pouch Medicine Horse had given him. Opening it carefully, he inhaled the earthy, herbal scent that reminded him so strongly of the wickiup where he had begun to heal, not just in body but in some deeper, unnamed way. For years, Quinn had drifted through life unattached, unrooted, telling himself it was freedom. Now, for the first time, he wondered if it had actually been a kind of cowardice, an unwillingness to risk the pain that came with genuine connection. Willow's words echoed in his mind. "Everyone belongs somewhere, Quinn Dawson. If you have not found that place, perhaps you have not looked with the right eyes." He tucked the medicine pouch back into his saddlebag and rolled onto his side, watching the dying embers of the fire. Tomorrow they would reach the Barcy and life would continue as before. He would tend horses, ride fences, draw his pay. Nothing would change, except everything already had. The Barcy Ranch sprawled across a verdant valley, its main house and outbuildings clustered around a central yard, where cowboys and ranch hands moved about their daily tasks. After nearly a week away, the sight should have felt like a return to familiar territory for Quinn. Instead, he experienced a curious sense of detachment, as if viewing the scene through someone else's eyes. Mr. Carlton, the ranch owner, greeted their return from the porch of the main house, his portly figure silhouetted against the whitewashed wall behind him. "Dawson, glad to see you in one piece," he called as they dismounted in the yard. "Buckley was convinced you'd met your maker out there." "Not quite yet, sir," Quinn replied, leading Chance toward the stable, though it was a near thing. "Well, get yourself cleaned up and rested. Buckley can fill me in on the details." The ranch owner turned his attention to Harlan, already dismissing Quinn from his thoughts. In the stable, Quinn unsaddled Chance and began rubbing the buckskin down, the familiar routine requiring little conscious thought. His mind wandered back to the mountains, to Willow's small band moving deeper into hidden valleys, to the peaceful meadow with its healing plants and clear spring. "Hey, Dawson!" The voice of Jimson, the Barcee's stable master, broke into his reverie. "You planning to groom that horse until sundown? Got 3 more waiting." Quinn realized he'd been standing motionless, brush in hand, lost in thought. "Sorry, Jim, got a bit distracted." The older man's weathered face creased in a grin. "Heard you had yourself quite an adventure. Arrow wound, is it?" He gestured to Quinn's shoulder. "Let me know if you need lighter duties for a few days." "I'll manage," Quinn assured him, resuming his grooming of Chance with more focus. Later, after washing up and changing into clean clothes from his sparse possessions in the bunkhouse, Quinn joined the other hands for the evening meal. The cook, a cantankerous old-timer named Whitley, had prepared a beef stew that filled the dining hall with rich, savory aromas. Quinn took his usual place at the long table, nodding greetings to the men he knew. Conversation flowed around him, talk of cattle prices, local gossip, complaints about chores, and good-natured ribbing. It was the familiar soundtrack of ranch life, yet Quinn found himself listening as if to a foreign language, unable to summon interest in the topics that had once seemed important enough. "Earth to Dawson," Pete said, elbowing him. "Jackson asked if you actually saw the Apache who shot you." Quinn realized several men were looking at him expectantly. He shook his head. "Just glimpsed movement. Took the arrow before I could get a good look." "Lucky you're still breathing," Jackson commented, a raw-boned cowhand who'd ridden with the Rangers before turning to ranch work. "Apache don't usually leave witnesses." "Bloodthirsty savages," another hand agreed. "Army ought to clean 'em all out of those mountains." Quinn focused on his stew, suddenly losing his appetite. These were sentiments he'd heard countless times before, had probably even voiced himself in the past. Now they scraped against his conscience like a burr under a saddle. "Not all of them are looking for trouble," he found himself saying. "Some just want to be left alone to live their lives." A silence fell over the nearby cowboys. Jackson gave him an odd look. "Since when are you an Indian lover, Dawson?" Quinn shrugged, regretting having spoken. "Just saying maybe they're not all the same, is all." "They're all the same when they're lifting your scalp," Jackson retorted, generating murmurs of agreement around the table. The conversation moved on, but Quinn felt Harlan's gaze on him from the far end of the table, watchful and calculating. The foreman had clearly noted the exchange and filed it away as further evidence of Quinn's suspect sympathies. After the meal, Quinn slipped outside, needing air and solitude. The sun had set, leaving a deep blue sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. He walked to the corral fence and leaned against it, watching the shadows deepen across the valley. "Settling back in all right," Harlan's voice came from behind him, deliberately casual. Quinn didn't turn, getting there. The foreman moved to stand beside him at the fence, lighting a cigarette. The match flared briefly in the gathering darkness, illuminating his beard and the hard lines of his face. "You know," Harlan said after taking a long drag, "I've been thinking about your story. About how you survived out there." Quinn remained silent, waiting. "Thing is, I believe you would help, and not the kind a man talks about openly." Harlan tapped ash from his cigarette. "Now I don't much care who or what gets a cowboy through a bad spot, so long as it doesn't bring trouble back to the ranch." "No trouble here," Quinn said evenly. "Just a man who's glad to be alive." Harlan nodded slowly. Keep it that way. Whatever you saw or did out there, it's best left in those mountains. He pushed away from the fence. Riding fence on the north section tomorrow, be ready at first light. After the foreman had gone, Quinn remained at the corral, considering the veiled warning. Harlan suspected the truth, but was offering a tacit agreement to let the matter rest, provided Quinn did the same. It was a pragmatic approach typical of the foreman, who valued the ranch's stability above all else. The problem was, Quinn wasn't sure he could simply file away his experiences in the Apache camp as an isolated incident, separate from his ongoing life. Something fundamental had shifted within him, a questioning of assumptions he'd never before examined, a recognition of possibilities he'd previously denied himself. Most troubling of all was the persistent image of Willow that surfaced in his mind during quiet moments. Her quiet strength, her compassion, her clear-eyed view of a world that had given her every reason for bitterness yet hadn't hardened her heart. As the night deepened around him, Quinn faced an uncomfortable truth. Returning to his old life intact might prove impossible, because he was no longer the same man who had ridden out tracking rustlers a week ago. The arrow that had pierced his shoulder had somehow reached something deeper, something long buried beneath years of aimless drifting. The question now was what to do with this unwelcome self-knowledge. 2 weeks passed as Quinn settled back into the rhythm of ranch life. He rode fence lines, helped break new horses, and performed the countless tasks that kept the Barcy functioning. His shoulder healed well, thanks to medicine horse's remedies, which Quinn applied faithfully each morning and evening. On the surface, he was the same capable, reserved cowhand he'd always been. He did his work efficiently, spoke when necessary, and maintained the appropriate distance from both his fellow workers and the ranch owners. Yet internally, a restlessness grew that became increasingly difficult to ignore. The bunkhouse felt claustrophobic after nights spent beneath the open sky. Conversations around the dinner table seemed trivial after discussions with Willow about healing, belonging, and the unseen forces that shape the world. Even his work with horses, usually his greatest satisfaction, felt mechanical and uninspired. Harlan noticed, of course. The foreman missed little that happened on his ranch. He assigned Quinn increasingly demanding tasks, perhaps testing his loyalty or simply trying to exhaust him beyond the capacity for discontent. Quinn met each challenge without complaint, but the physical exertion did nothing to quiet his troubled mind. On a sweltering afternoon, as Quinn worked with a particularly stubborn 3-year-old bay in the training corral, Jimson approached the fence. "Got a visitor asking for you," the stable master said, gesturing toward the main yard. "Mexican fella says it's important." Quinn frowned, unable to think of any Mexican acquaintances who would seek him out at the ranch. He handed the bay's lead rope to Jimson and headed toward the yard, wiping sweat from his forehead with a bandana. Near the watering trough stood a middle-aged Mexican man wearing the dust-covered clothes of a long-distance traveler. His horse, a sturdy paint, looked equally road-worn. "Senor Dawson?" the man inquired as Quinn approached. "That's me." The stranger reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small package wrapped in buckskin and tied with sinew. "I was asked to deliver this to you," he said, handing it over, "from a friend in the mountains." Quinn's heart jumped. "Who gave this to you?" The man shrugged. "I trade sometimes with the people in the high country. They know I come to the settlements. A woman asked me to bring this when next I traveled this way." He paused, then added meaningfully, "She said you would understand its purpose." Quinn glanced around to ensure they weren't being observed too closely. "Thank you for bringing it. Your horse looks tired. The stable master can help you water and feed him before you move on." The trader nodded his appreciation. "Gracias. I will be on my way before sundown. I have family waiting in Tucson." He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "She seemed a kind woman. Unusual to find such kindness in these hard times." "Yes," Quinn agreed quietly. "Very unusual." After directing the trader to Jimson, Quinn retreated to a quiet spot behind the stable to examine the package. The buckskin wrapping came away to reveal a small woven basket, its intricate pattern immediately recognizable as Apache work. Inside lay 3 items. A pouch similar to the medicine pouch medicine horse had given him but smaller, a carved wooden bead on a leather cord, and a folded piece of paper. Quinn unfolded the paper first, surprised to find it covered in neat, educated handwriting. Quinn Dawson. The small medicine pouch contains seeds from the healing flowers in my special meadow. They will grow if planted near water in the spring. The bead was carved by my father as protection for travelers. He says it carries the prayers of our people for safe journeys. I do not know if this message will reach you, or if you will welcome it if it does. But I have thought often of our conversations and the questions they raised for both of us. In these troubled times, it is rare to find understanding across the divisions that separate our peoples. My father says that when the Creator places 2 souls in each other's path, there is purpose in the meeting, even if we cannot immediately see it. I believe this to be true. Our band remains safe in the high country for now, though we hear rumors of increased army patrols. The future is uncertain, as it always is for my people. But uncertainty has been our companion for generations. We face it with the strength of those who have survived much. May your path be clear and your heart guide you truly. Willow. Quinn read the letter twice, then carefully folded it again. The simple message affected him more deeply than he wanted to admit. He slipped the leather cord with the carved bead around his neck, tucking it beneath his shirt, and secured both the seed pouch and the letter in his inner vest pocket. Returning to his duties, Quinn found his mind clearer than it had been in weeks. The restlessness remained, but it now had direction and purpose. Willow's letter had confirmed what he'd been reluctant to acknowledge, that their brief connection had meant something to her as well, and that the questions raised during his time in the Apache camp deserved serious consideration. That evening, as the hands gathered for supper, Quinn ate quietly, his thoughts far from the bunkhouse conversation. When the meal concluded, he approached Harlan, who was reviewing a ledger at the small desk near the cookhouse door. "Need to speak with you," Quinn said without preamble. Harlan glanced up, his expression guarded. "What about?" "Thinking it's time I moved on, wanted to give proper notice." The foreman studied him for a long moment. "Carlton won't be pleased. You're one of the better hands with the horses. Been here almost a year, longer than most places." Harlan closed his ledger. "This have anything to do with what happened in the mountains?" Quinn met his gaze steadily. "Just time for a change. Where you heading?" "North maybe. Heard there's work in Colorado." Harlan clearly didn't believe him but didn't press further. "Your call. Finish out the month and we'll square your pay." "Appreciate it," Quinn said, turning to leave. "Dawson," Harlan called after him. When Quinn looked back, the foreman's expression was uncharacteristically grave. "Whatever you're chasing, or whatever's chasing you, make sure it's worth the risk." The warning was clear enough. Quinn nodded once in acknowledgement and continued outside into the gathering dusk. Over the next 2 weeks, Quinn prepared methodically for departure. He purchased supplies in town, ammunition, preserved foods, an extra blanket, and a small packet of seeds for vegetables that might supplement his diet on the trail. To Jimson's questions about his destination, he gave vague answers about job prospects up north. To Pete's more direct inquiries, he simply said he'd grown restless, which was true enough. The night before his planned departure, Quinn sat alone on the bunkhouse steps, watching the stars emerge. The familiar weight of the carved bead rested against his chest beneath his shirt, a constant reminder of the decision he was making. He had no illusions about the challenges ahead. Finding Willow's band in the vastness of the mountains would be difficult enough. Bridging the cultural divide between them would be harder still. He wasn't even certain of his own intentions, only that he needed to see her again, to explore the connection that had formed between them during those few transformative days. Heading out at first light, Pete's voice interrupted his thoughts as the younger man settled beside him on the steps. "That's the plan. Harlan thinks you're crazy to leave a steady position here." Quinn smiled slightly. "Wouldn't be the first time someone thought I was crazy." Pete was silent for a moment, then said, "It's a woman, isn't it? Got to be, for a man to just up and leave good work behind." Quinn didn't answer directly. Ever feel like you've been sleepwalking through life, Pete? Just going through the motions without really thinking about where you're headed or why? The younger cowboy looked puzzled. Can't say that I have. A job's a job. You do the work, get paid, have some fun when you can. What else is there? That's the question, isn't it? Pete shook his head. You're talking in riddles, Dawson. But whatever you're chasing, I hope you find it. He stood, stretching. Buy you a farewell drink in town. Several of us are riding in tonight. Thanks, but I've got some final packing to do. Another time. After Pete left, Quinn remained on the steps until the night air grew cool. Tomorrow he would ride away from the Barcy, ostensibly heading north but actually turning toward the mountains once out of sight. Whether he was embarking on a fool's errand or following the most important impulse of his life remained to be seen. For the first time in years, the uncertainty felt like possibility rather than risk. The mountains rose before Quinn, their rugged silhouettes familiar yet daunting. 3 days had passed since he'd left the Barcy, traveling light and fast, camping in secluded spots, and keeping a watchful eye for other travelers. The last thing he wanted was to encounter Harlan or any of the ranch hands who might question his direction of travel. Now, as he approached the foothills, the magnitude of his task became increasingly apparent. The Dragoon Mountains covered hundreds of square miles, with countless hidden valleys, narrow canyons, and secluded plateaus where a small band of Apache might remain undetected. Without Willow's guidance, finding their new camp would be like seeking a particular drop of water in a vast river. Yet Quinn wasn't entirely without resources. During his recovery in the Apache camp, he had carefully observed their routines and practices. He knew they needed reliable water sources, preferably springs that wouldn't dry up during drought. They required hunting grounds and areas where medicinal plants grew. Most importantly, they needed defensible positions with clear sight lines and multiple escape routes. These parameters narrowed the search somewhat, but still left vast territories to explore. Quinn's best hope lay in finding signs of their passage trail markers perhaps, or evidence of temporary camps that might indicate their direction of travel. He entered the mountains through the same canyon where he had first encountered Willow, hoping to retrace their journey to the camp and then follow any signs of their departure. The landscape looked different now, the afternoon shadows falling at different angles, the summer vegetation fuller than during his previous passage. At the spot where he believed he had fallen from his horse, Quinn dismounted and surveyed the area carefully. No obvious signs remained of that encounter. The desert claimed such evidence quickly. But the location aligned with his memory of the canyon's curve and the distinctive rock formation overhead. From there, Quinn tried to reconstruct the route Willow must have taken to bring him to the camp. This proved more challenging, as he had been unconscious during that journey. After several false starts, he located a narrow side trail that seemed the most likely path and followed it upward. By nightfall, Quinn had established that he was indeed on the correct track. He discovered the remnants of the Apache camp, circles of stones that had contained fires, compressed earth where wickiups had stood, and a few discarded items deemed not worth carrying. A broken pottery shard, frayed cordage, a child's worn-out moccasin. The abandoned camp yielded few clues about the band's subsequent movements. Quinn made his own camp nearby, cooking a simple meal over a small, well-shielded fire. As darkness settled over the mountains, he found himself imagining Willow in the same spot, perhaps looking up at these same stars and wondering about his fate as he now wondered about hers. The next morning, Quinn began a systematic search of the surrounding area, looking for any sign of the band's departure route. He worked in expanding circles from the camp, examining game trails and natural pathways that might accommodate people traveling with horses and travois. By midday, his persistence was rewarded when he discovered faint markings on a juniper tree at the junction of two trails, 3 small notches arranged in a pattern that seemed deliberate rather than random. Similar markings appeared on trees or rocks at irregular intervals along one of the trails, always at points where the path divided or became unclear. Quinn followed these markers deeper into the mountains, moving cautiously and making camp each night in defensible positions. He encountered no other travelers, though twice he spotted distant dust that might have indicated army patrols in the lower valleys. The solitude suited him, providing time to consider what he would say when, if he found Willow's band. On the fourth day in the mountains, the trail markers led him to a high meadow nestled between rocky ridges. A small stream cut through its center, creating a verdant oasis amid the more arid surrounding terrain. Quinn approached cautiously, aware that such a location might serve as a hunting ground or gathering place for the Apache. The meadow appeared deserted, but recent signs of human presence were evident: a trampled area near the stream, the remains of a small fire, branches cut from nearby trees with clean, deliberate strokes rather than broken off. As Quinn dismounted to examine these signs more closely, the hairs on the back of his neck prickled with the distinct sensation of being watched. Slowly, he straightened and turned, scanning the ridgeline above the meadow. Nothing moved against the sky, yet the feeling persisted. Quinn knew better than to dismiss such instincts. He walked casually to chance, as if preparing to depart, while continuing to survey his surroundings from the corner of his eye. "I know you're there," he called out finally, his voice echoing slightly against the rocky slopes. "I'm alone, and I mean no harm." Silence answered him. Then, a subtle movement drew his attention to a cluster of boulders on the eastern ridge. A figure rose from perfect concealment, a young Apache man holding a rifle trained steadily on Quinn's chest. "That's far enough, white man," the Apache called in accented but clear English. "State your business here." Quinn raised his hand slightly to demonstrate his peaceful intentions. "I'm looking for Medicine Horse's band. I was helped by them some weeks ago when I was wounded." The young man's expression remained impassive, but Quinn sensed a flicker of recognition. Many white men claim to be friends of the Apache when it suits them. "My name is Quinn Dawson. Medicine Horse's daughter, Willow, saved my life. I received a message from her through a Mexican trader. I've come to speak with her again." The rifle didn't waver. "Why would she send for you?" "She didn't send for me," Quinn admitted. "The choice to return was mine, but she did reach out to me, which I took as permission to try and find her again." The young Apache studied him for a long moment, weighing his words. Finally, he lowered the rifle slightly. "Wait here. Do not follow or you will be shot." With that, he disappeared behind the boulders as silently as he had appeared. Quinn exhaled slowly, settling in to wait. He led Chance to the stream, allowing the horse to drink while he refilled his own canteen. The encounter confirmed he was on the right track. The sentry clearly recognized the names he had mentioned. Now the question was whether he would be welcomed or sent away. Nearly an hour passed before the young Apache returned, accompanied by an older man Quinn recognized as one of Medicine Horse's close associates from the camp. "Quinn Dawson," the older man acknowledged with a slight nod. "White Horse remembers you. You were near death when Willow brought you to our camp." "I remember you too," Quinn replied respectfully. "You helped Medicine Horse prepare remedies for my wound." White Horse nodded again, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Why have you come back to these mountains?" "It is dangerous for a white man to travel alone in Apache territory." "I came to see Willow again," Quinn answered honestly. "Our conversations during my recovery, they changed something in me. I couldn't simply return to my old life without at least speaking with her once more." The two Apache exchanged glances, communicating silently in the way of those who know each other's minds well. "Medicine Horse foresaw that you might return," White Horse said finally. "He said the Creator had not finished with the connection between you and his daughter." He gestured toward the western ridge. "Our camp is 2 hours' ride from here. You may come, but you will be blindfolded for part of the journey. This is not negotiable." Quinn recognized both the concession and its limits. "I understand, thank you." The younger Apache still looked suspicious, but deferred to White Horse's decision. Together, they led Quinn along a series of increasingly obscure trails, eventually blindfolding him as promised for what felt like the most complex portion of the journey. When the blindfold was removed, They were descending into a hidden valley cradled between steep mountain walls. A waterfall tumbled from the northern cliff face, feeding a clear pool that gave rise to a small stream winding through the valley floor. The Apache camp was arranged around this water source, the conical wickiups blending harmoniously with the surrounding landscape. As they approached, Quinn noticed activity in the camp pausing as people became aware of the stranger in their midst. Children were quickly gathered by watchful mothers, and several men moved to defensive positions, weapons at hand. White Horse led Quinn to an open area near the central fire pit, instructing him to wait while he consulted with Medicine Horse. The younger Apache guard remained nearby, his rifle still at the ready, his expression making it clear that Quinn should make no sudden movements. Quinn stood quietly, feeling the weight of dozens of evaluating gazes. He spotted several faces he recognized from his previous stay, though none showed any welcome. He understood their caution. A white man voluntarily seeking out an Apache camp represented an unknown threat, regardless of previous encounters. Finally, the flap of a nearby wickiup opened, and Medicine Horse emerged. The healer's face revealed nothing as he approached, his bearing dignified and measured as Quinn remembered. "Quinn Dawson," he said, stopping a few paces away. "You have traveled far to find us." Quinn nodded respectfully. "Thank you for allowing me into your camp again. I know it represents a risk for your people." "Why have you come?" The question was direct, the tone neither welcoming nor hostile. "To see your daughter again," Quinn answered with equal directness. "To understand better what began during my time here." Medicine Horse studied him with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see beneath surface appearances. "And what do you believe began here, Quinn Dawson?" The question cut to the heart of matters Quinn had been avoiding defining too precisely, even to himself. Yet honesty seemed the only viable approach. "A recognition," he said carefully, "that the path I've been following is empty, that there might be another way to live than the one I've chosen. Your daughter helped me see this, though I don't think she intended to." Medicine Horse's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, assessment, perhaps, or cautious approval. "Willow is not in camp," he said finally. "She has gone to the high meadow to gather medicine plants. She will return by sunset." He gestured to a spot near the edge of the camp. "You may wait there. White Horse will bring you food and water. Do not wander or approach the wickiups. Some here remember your previous visit with kindness. Others see only a white man in a place where white men rarely come with good intentions." With that he turned and walked away, leaving Quinn to the designated waiting area, close enough to observe camp life but separate from it. The message was clear. He was neither prisoner nor guest, but something in between whose status remained to be determined. White Horse brought a clay cup of water and a wooden bowl containing dried meat and some kind of seed cake. Quinn thanked him and ate slowly, settling in for what might be a long wait. The younger guard eventually relaxed enough to sit as well, though he kept his rifle across his knees, his attention never fully leaving the visitor. As the afternoon progressed, Quinn observed the rhythms of Apache camp life: women working at various crafts, children playing under watchful eyes, men returning from hunting or scouting expeditions. Though many cast curious or suspicious glances his way, most simply went about their business, incorporating his anomalous presence into the day's pattern with the adaptability of a people accustomed to changing circumstances. The sun was approaching the western ridge when movement at the camp's edge drew Quinn's attention. A slender figure led a pony down the trail from the highlands, a loaded travois dragging behind the animal. Even at a distance, Quinn recognized Willow's distinctive grace of movement. His heart beat faster as she approached the camp. She had not yet noticed him, focused on guiding her pony through the rocky path. Women called greetings to her, and children ran to meet her, clearly eager to see what she might have brought back from her gathering expedition. Then, as she reached the camp's perimeter, someone gestured toward Quinn's position. Willow's head turned sharply, and even across the distance, he could see her freeze in momentary shock. She spoke briefly to the women nearest her, handed the pony's lead to an older child, and then walked directly toward him, her expression unreadable. Quinn rose to his feet as she approached, suddenly uncertain of what to say after all his careful tracking and determined journey. The young guard stood as well, moving slightly aside but remaining vigilant. Willow stopped a few paces from Quinn, her dark eyes searching his face as if looking for answers to unspoken questions. She wore the same practical buckskin clothing he remembered from their journey through the canyons, her long black hair braided and wrapped with a red cloth band. The afternoon sunlight caught the planes of her face, highlighting the proud curve of her cheekbones and the slight furrow between her brows. "Quinn Dawson," she said finally, his name carrying a wealth of unspoken thoughts. "You are far from your ranch." "I left the Barcy," he replied simply. "Got your message through the trader." "I did not ask you to come here," she pointed out, her tone not unkind but cautious. "No, you didn't," Quinn held her gaze steadily. "That decision was mine." A moment of silence stretched between them, heavy with all that remained unsaid. Then Willow turned to the guard and spoke rapidly in Apache. The young man looked reluctant but eventually nodded and moved several paces away, still keeping them in sight but giving them a measure of privacy. "You risked much to find us," Willow observed, her voice lowered. "Why?" The directness of her question demanded equal honesty. "Because after I returned to the ranch, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversations, about the questions you asked that I couldn't answer. About the way you see the world." He paused, then added more quietly, "about you." Willow's composure faltered briefly, a flash of something vulnerable crossing her features before she regained control. "Thinking about something and risking your life for it are very different matters, Quinn Dawson." "Maybe that's part of what I needed to understand," he admitted. "The difference between drifting through life and actually choosing a direction." She studied him for a long moment. "And what direction have you chosen?" "I'm still figuring that out," Quinn said honestly, "but I know it had to start with finding you again." Willow glanced toward where her father's wickiup stood, then back to Quinn. "My father allowed you into our camp. This means he sees purpose in your return, though he may not share his thoughts with either of us." She hesitated, then added, "I cannot speak with you further now. I must attend to the plants I have gathered before they lose their potency, but perhaps, tomorrow we might talk more." It wasn't the welcome Quinn had imagined during his journey, but it wasn't rejection either. He nodded his acceptance. "Tomorrow, then." Willow turned to go, then paused, looking back at him with an expression that had softened slightly. "I am glad the seed pouch found you safely. Did you plant any yet?" "Not yet. I was waiting to learn more about how they should be tended." The hint of a smile touched her lips. "Tomorrow I will tell you." With that, she walked away, returning to her duties with the same purposeful grace that had first caught Quinn's attention in the canyon weeks before. As darkness fell, White Horse approached again, carrying a blanket. "You will sleep here tonight," he said, indicating the same spot where Quinn had waited through the afternoon. "In the morning, we will decide what is to be done." "Thank you," Quinn replied, accepting the blanket. "I appreciate your people's tolerance of my presence." White Horse regarded him thoughtfully. "Medicine Horse says the Creator sends people across our paths for reasons we may not immediately understand. Perhaps your return has purpose beyond what you yourself recognize." With that enigmatic observation, he left Quinn to make his simple camp beneath the stars, surrounded by the quiet murmurs of Apache life continuing around him, separate but no longer entirely alien. Dawn broke clear and cool over the hidden valley. Quinn awoke to the sounds of the camp stirring around him, quiet conversations in Apache, the crackling of morning fires being built, children's voices calling to one another. He sat up, stretching carefully to test his fully healed shoulder, and found White Horse approaching with a clay cup of something steaming. "Medicine Horse says you should drink this," the older Apache said, offering the cup. "It will strengthen you for the day ahead." Quinn accepted it gratefully, recognizing the earthy aroma of the herbal tea he had been given during his recovery. "Thank you, and please thank Medicine Horse for his continued generosity." White Horse nodded, then added, "The council will meet this morning to discuss your presence here. Medicine Horse has asked that you remain in this area until they have reached a decision. After the older man had gone, Quinn sipped the tea slowly, watching the camp's morning activities unfold. Children carried water from the stream, women tended cooking fires, and men gathered in small groups, many casting occasional glances in his direction. The atmosphere was not overtly hostile, but neither was it welcoming. His status remained that of an anomaly to be evaluated and addressed. He spotted Willow emerging from her father's wickiup, engaged in conversation with Medicine Horse. The healer gestured toward the cluster of men gathering near the central fire pit, apparently explaining something of significance. Willow listened attentively, nodding occasionally, her expression serious. When Medicine Horse moved away to join the gathering men, Willow glanced in Quinn's direction. After a moment's hesitation, she walked toward him, carrying a small basket. "Good morning," she said as she approached. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough," Quinn replied, "though I'm not sure everyone in camp was comfortable with me being here overnight." "They were not," Willow confirmed matter-of-factly, settling beside him and opening her basket to reveal several flat cakes of what appeared to be corn and seed meal. "But my father's word carries weight, and he said you should stay." She offered him one of the cakes. "You should eat. The council may take some time." Quinn accepted the food, noting that Willow seemed more at ease than during their brief encounter the previous evening. "What exactly is this council deciding?" "Whether you should remain in our camp or be escorted from our territory." She met his gaze directly. "Your presence creates complications, Quinn Dawson. Not everyone shares my father's belief that the Creator guided you back to us for a purpose." "And what do you believe?" Quinn asked quietly. Willow's dark eyes studied him thoughtfully. "I believe that when the same person appears twice in your path against all likelihood, wisdom suggests paying attention." She paused, then added, "But wisdom also counsels caution when that person comes from a world that has brought much suffering to your people." It was a fair assessment, neither rejecting the possibility of meaningful connection nor ignoring the reality of their different worlds. Quinn appreciated her honesty even as it underscored the challenges they faced. "The seeds you sent me," he said, changing the subject slightly. "You mentioned you would tell me how they should be planted." Willow's expression softened slightly. "They need moist soil and partial shade, not the full desert sun. In spring is best after the last frost has passed." Her fingers traced a pattern in the dust beside her. "They should be planted in groups of 3, with space between each group for the flowers to spread as they grow. And these are the healing flowers. The ones that helped draw the poison from my wound." She nodded. "We call them ghost flowers because they appear suddenly after rain and can vanish just as quickly in drought. But with proper care they will return year after year." A small smile touched her lips. "They are survivors, adapting to harsh conditions by sending their roots deep." The metaphor wasn't lost on Quinn. "Like your people." "Like all who endure in this land," she amended, "including, perhaps, wandering cowboys who find themselves in unexpected places." The gentle teasing suggested a thawing in her reserve. Quinn smiled in response, feeling some of the tension between them ease. "I'm not sure I've done much enduring, more like drifting wherever the wind pushed me. And yet here you are, having made a deliberate choice to find us again." "That is not drifting, Quinn Dawson." She tilted her head slightly, regarding him with curiosity. "What did you tell your employer when you left?" "That it was time to move on. Gave proper notice, worked out my contract." "And your destination?" "Officially, Colorado. I let them believe I was heading north for new opportunities." Willow processed this information thoughtfully. "So no one knows you came looking for us?" "No one," Quinn confirmed. "Though my foreman had suspicions about how I survived my wound. He didn't press the matter, but he wasn't fooled by my story about recovering alone." Their conversation was interrupted as Medicine Horse approached, his expression grave. Behind him, Quinn could see the council of men still in discussion, occasionally glancing in their direction. "The council wishes to speak with you," the healer said without preamble. "They have questions about your purpose here and what you intend." Quinn nodded, rising to his feet. I understand. Willow stood as well, exchanging a brief look with her father that seemed to communicate volumes without words. Medicine Horse nodded slightly in response, then turned to lead Quinn toward the gathered men. The council consisted of 7 Apache men of varying ages, seated in a rough semicircle around the central fire pit. Quinn recognized White Horse among them, though the others were either unfamiliar or only vaguely remembered from his previous stay. Medicine Horse indicated that Quinn should stand before them, then took his own place slightly apart, present but apparently not voting in whatever decision was to be made. White Horse spoke first, addressing Quinn in his accented but clear English. Quinn Dawson, you have returned to our territory without invitation, seeking out our hidden camp. This is a matter of concern for those tasked with protecting our people. I understand your concerns, Quinn replied respectfully. My intentions are peaceful. I came alone and unarmed except for what any traveler would carry for protection in the wilderness. An older man with a deeply lined face spoke in Apache, his tone clearly questioning. White Horse translated. Tall Elk asks why we should believe the word of a white man when white men's promises to the Apache have proven false so many times before. It was a fair question with no easy answer. Quinn considered his response carefully. I can only speak for myself, not for other white men. When I was wounded and helpless, your people showed me mercy and healing instead of leaving me to die as many would have done. I've returned because that experience changed something in me that I'm still trying to understand. Another councilman spoke, this one younger and more hostile in his demeanor. White Horse translated again. Running Wolf says pretty words mean nothing. He asks what you seek from Willow, daughter of Medicine Horse. Why travel so far and risk so much merely to speak with her again? The direct question pushed Quinn toward a level of honesty he hadn't fully articulated even to himself. He glanced briefly at Willow, who stood quietly near her father, her expression controlled but her eyes intent on his face. In my life, I've moved from place to place, job to job, never staying anywhere long enough to form real connections, Quinn began, choosing his words with care. It seemed easier that way, safer. But during my time in your camp, in conversations with Willow, I began to question whether that was truly living or merely existing. He faced the council directly. I came back because for the first time in years, I found myself caring about something beyond simple survival. I came back because Willow made me see the emptiness of the path I was following and the possibility of something more meaningful. White Horse translated his words, leading to a murmur of discussion among the council members. Quinn couldn't interpret their reactions, but he sensed the scrutiny intensifying. The older man, Tall Elk, spoke again, more extensively this time. When he finished, White Horse turned to Quinn with a grave expression. He asks what you propose. If you have developed feelings for Medicine Horse's daughter, what outcome do you envision? Would you ask her to leave her people and live in the white world where she would face scorn and hatred? Or do you imagine yourself living among the Apache, a people hunted by your own kind? The blunt questions laid bare the practical impossibilities that Quinn had avoided confronting directly during his journey. The council watched him intently, waiting to see how he would respond to these harsh realities. I don't have answers to those questions, Quinn admitted finally. I didn't come with a plan beyond finding Willow again and seeing if what I felt during my time here was real or merely the product of unusual circumstances. He paused, then added with complete honesty, I know the challenges are immense, perhaps insurmountable. But I also know that continuing my former life, without at least exploring the possibility of something different, was no longer acceptable to me. As White Horse translated, Quinn noticed Medicine Horse watching him with an unreadable expression. When the translation finished, the healer spoke briefly in Apache, causing several council members to nod thoughtfully. White Horse explained, Medicine Horse says that when he treated your wound, he saw a man whose body wished to live even as his spirit remained uncertain. He says that such division cannot sustain life for long. Either the spirit must find its purpose, or the body will eventually surrender. The observation struck Quinn with its accuracy. Before his wounding, he had indeed been moving through life with a kind of spiritual numbness, going through the motions without genuine engagement or purpose. The council conferred among themselves in low voices for several minutes. Finally, White Horse addressed Quinn again. "The council has reached a decision. You may remain in our camp for 7 days as a guest of Medicine Horse. During this time, you may speak with Willow and others who are willing to teach you about our ways. At the end of 7 days, you must leave our territory, having made your choice about what path you will follow thereafter." He paused, then added more sternly, "You must give your word that you will not reveal our location to any other white men, regardless of what you decide." "You have my word," Quinn replied without hesitation. "I would never betray your trust in that way." White Horse nodded, apparently satisfied with his sincerity. "Then it is decided. You will move your sleeping place to the edge of Medicine Horse's wickiup as his guest. You will obey our rules and respect our customs. Any violation will result in immediate escort from our territory." The terms were fair, more generous in fact than Quinn had dared hope for. He inclined his head respectfully to the council. "Thank you for this opportunity. I will honor your conditions completely." As the council dispersed, Medicine Horse approached Quinn, his weathered face solemn but not unfriendly. "The council has shown wisdom. 7 days is time enough to listen to what the Creator may be speaking to both your heart and my daughters." He glanced toward where Willow stood watching them. "She has her own decision to make in this matter. Her path is hers to choose, as yours is yours." With that enigmatic statement, he moved away, leaving Quinn to contemplate the complex situation he had created with his return. 7 days to explore an impossible connection, to navigate cultural chasms, to determine whether what he felt was genuine understanding or merely romantic illusion. Willow approached, her expression thoughtful. "You have been granted rare privilege," she observed. "Few white men have ever been invited to stay among our people as guests rather than prisoners or temporary allies of convenience." "I understand the honor being extended," Quinn assured her, "and the responsibility that comes with it." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with his response. "Come then, I will show you where you may place your things near my father's wickiup. Then, if you wish, I can take you to see more of our valley." As Quinn gathered his minimal possessions and followed Willow through the camp, he was acutely aware of the curious and occasionally suspicious gazes that followed them. He had been granted a temporary place here, but acceptance would require more than a council's decision. It would demand proving himself worthy of the trust being extended. 7 days suddenly seemed both an eternity and an impossibly brief moment in time. The first 3 days of Quinn's stay in the Apache camp established a pattern. Each morning, he awoke at dawn and joined Medicine Horse for a cup of herbal tea before the healer began his daily duties. These brief, often silent interactions gradually evolved to include Medicine Horse's observations about the natural world, the medicinal properties of specific plants, the behavior of animals, the subtle signs that indicated changing weather. Quinn listened attentively, recognizing that the older man was offering valuable knowledge rather than mere conversation. Though Medicine Horse never directly addressed the unspoken question of Quinn's feelings for his daughter, his willingness to share tribal wisdom suggested a cautious openness to the possibility of deeper connection. During the mornings, Quinn generally accompanied Willow as she performed her duties, gathering medicinal plants, tending to minor injuries and ailments among the band members, or working with the other women on essential tasks like food preparation and hide tanning. These shared activities provided natural opportunities for conversation, allowing their connection to develop through practical engagement rather than forced intimacy. "Your people waste nothing," Quinn observed on the 3rd morning as he helped Willow prepare a deer hide, scraping it clean with a bone tool she had shown him how to use. "On the ranches, we take the meat and maybe the hide, but leave the rest." Willow nodded, her skilled hands working efficiently. "The Apache way teaches that all parts of an animal have purpose: bones for tools, sinew for thread and bowstrings, organs for food or medicine, hooves for glue. To waste any part dishonors both the animal and the Creator who provided it." Makes sense when you think about it, Quinn acknowledged, though I never did before. Most people never question the ways they are taught, Willow replied without judgment. It is easier to follow familiar paths than to look for new ones. Such exchanges characterized their interactions, observations about their different cultural practices that gradually revealed deeper values and perspectives. Quinn found himself increasingly drawn to the holistic worldview Willow expressed, which contrasted sharply with the more exploitative approach to nature he had grown up with. In the afternoons, Quinn was often invited to join the men in their activities, hunting expeditions, weapon making, or horse training. These invitations came primarily from White Horse, who seemed to have appointed himself Quinn's primary liaison with the male members of the band. "You sit a horse well," the older Apache observed during a ride to check snares in a nearby canyon. "Better than most white men I have seen." "Spent most of my life on horseback," Quinn explained. "It's the one skill I've truly developed." White Horse nodded thoughtfully. "A man and his horse can become like one creature with two minds. The Apache understand this. It seems you do as well." These grudging recognitions of shared values gradually softened the wariness with which most of the men regarded him. Never completely accepted, Quinn nonetheless earned a measure of respect through his willingness to learn, his competence in frontier skills, and his evident desire to understand rather than judge their ways. The children adapted to his presence most quickly, their natural curiosity overcoming initial shyness. By the third day, several of the younger ones had taken to following him around the camp, giggling when he noticed them and peppering him with questions when he acknowledged their presence. "Why is your hair that color?" a small boy asked as Quinn sat mending a tear in his shirt outside Medicine Horse's wickiup. "Because that's how I was born," Quinn replied with a smile. "Just like you were born with your hair color." "But all Apache have black hair," the child insisted. "Your hair is the color of dead grass." Quinn laughed at the unflattering but accurate description of his sandy brown hair. "Different peoples have different colors. That's how the Creator made us." The boy considered this seriously. "Willow says you are a good man even though you are white. Is that true?" The innocent question caught Quinn off guard. "I try to be," he answered carefully, "but being good isn't about color. There are good and bad people among all peoples." The child nodded as if this confirmed something important. "That is what Willow says too. She says we must see with the heart, not just the eyes." As the boy ran off to join his friends, Quinn found himself reflecting on what the child had revealed. That Willow had spoken positively about him to others in the camp, defending his character despite the understandable prejudice against white men. The thought warmed him in a way that went beyond the afternoon sun on his face. Evenings brought the entire band together around the central fires for meals, storytelling, and occasional music and dancing. Quinn was always positioned slightly apart, included but distinct, a visitor rather than a member. Yet even this separation gradually softened, with individuals occasionally bringing him portions of food or asking his opinion on matters relating to the outside world. On the evening of the third day, as stories were being shared in Apache, Willow settled beside Quinn to translate in a low voice. "This is the tale of Coyote and Eagle," she explained as an elderly woman gestured expressively while speaking. "It teaches about the dangers of pride and the value of different kinds of wisdom." Quinn listened attentively as Willow translated the complex story, which indeed featured Coyote's trickery and Eagle's prideful nature leading both into trouble before they learned to respect each other's strengths. The parallels to human relationships, particularly between different peoples, weren't lost on him. "Your stories contain much wisdom," he observed when the tale concluded. "All peoples have teaching stories," Willow replied. "Does your people not have tales that guide the young toward right thinking?" Quinn thought about it. "We have the Bible stories, I suppose, and fairy tales from the old countries, but sitting together like this, passing them down by speaking rather than reading, that's something we've mostly lost." "That is sad," Willow said simply. "When stories are only in books, they lose the breath of life that comes from being spoken aloud from one heart to another. Her observation struck Quinn as profoundly true. So much of what he was experiencing in the Apache camp involved direct transmission of knowledge and values, person to person, generation to generation, without the mediation of written words or formal institutions. As the evening's activities wound down and people began retiring to their wickiups, Quinn and Willow lingered by the dying fire, their conversation having drifted to more personal topics. "You never speak of your family," Willow noted. "Are they still living?" Quinn shook his head. "Lost them both to cholera when I was 16. Farm was foreclosed on soon after, been on my own since then." "That explains much about you," she said thoughtfully. "To lose your people so young leaves marks on the spirit." "I suppose it does," Quinn acknowledged, having never really considered how that early loss had shaped his reluctance to form attachments. "What about your mother?" "You've never mentioned her." Willow's expression grew more solemn. "She died when I was 14, giving birth to what would have been my second brother. The baby did not survive either." She paused, then added, "That is when my father began teaching me the healing ways more intensively. Perhaps to give meaning to his grief." "And your other brother, the one who fell ill?" "That was 3 years later." Her voice remained steady, but Quinn could hear the controlled pain beneath her composure. "Sometimes I think my father's determination to train me as a healer was the Creator's preparation for that loss, giving me skills I would need to face it, even though they proved insufficient in the end." The revelation of these parallels in their lives, both orphaned young, both shaped by significant losses, created a new dimension to their connection. Quinn realized that beneath their obvious cultural differences lay similar experiences of pain and resilience. "Yet you didn't become bitter," he observed. "After what happened with the white doctor refusing to help your brother, you still chose to help me, a stranger from the people who had hurt you." Willow gazed into the embers of the dying fire. "Bitterness is a poison that harms only the vessel that contains it," she said softly. "My father taught me this. To let hatred rule your actions is to let others control your spirit from afar." Her wisdom humbled Quinn, who recognized that he had indeed allowed his early losses to control his life choices, not through hatred but through disengagement, which was perhaps merely another face of the same coin. "In 3 days," Willow continued, changing the subject, "you have learned much about our ways, yet you have shared little of what you are seeking here. The council asked what outcome you envision, and you said you had no answers." She turned to look at him directly. "Have you found any answers in these days among us?" The question demanded honesty beyond what Quinn had yet articulated even to himself. He met her gaze steadily, knowing that evasion would dishonor both of them. "I've found that the connection I felt with you during my recovery wasn't just gratitude or unusual circumstances," he said carefully. "It was recognition of something rare, a person whose spirit speaks to mine in ways I've never experienced before." He paused, then added, "But I've also seen more clearly the reality of our different worlds and the challenges that reality presents." Willow nodded, neither encouraging nor discouraging his candor. "And have you considered what these challenges might mean for any future you might imagine?" "Constantly," Quinn admitted, "I see no easy path. If I asked you to leave your people for my world, I would be asking you to endure prejudice and hatred you don't deserve. If I tried to join your world, I would bring danger to your band simply by my presence, not to mention my own limitations in understanding your ways." "Yet you came anyway," Willow observed. "Knowing these realities." "I came because not coming felt like surrendering to fear and convention without even trying to find another way." Quinn gestured toward the surrounding camp. "Your people have survived by adapting to changing circumstances while holding to their core values. Perhaps there are adaptations we haven't yet imagined that could create a different kind of future." Willow's expression softened slightly. "My father says the Creator sometimes places impossible challenges before us not to defeat us, but to force us to discover new strength within ourselves." She rose gracefully to her feet. "It is late, we should rest. Tomorrow I will show you a special place in our valley. Perhaps there we can speak more of these difficult questions. As she walked away toward her father's wickiup, Quinn remained by the fire, contemplating the path that had led him here and the uncertain road ahead. 3 days had brought greater clarity about his feelings for Willow, but had only begun to address the formidable obstacles facing any deeper connection between them. 4 days remained in his allotted time, 4 days to navigate a seemingly impossible divide, or to accept that some connections, however genuine, cannot overcome the weight of historical and cultural realities. The 4th day dawned clear and cool, the kind of perfect autumn morning that makes the desert seem almost gentle in its beauty. Quinn awoke to find Medicine Horse already gone from the wickiup, apparently having left for his daily routine without waking his guest. As Quinn stepped outside, stretching in the early light, Willow approached carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Good morning," she greeted him. "I have prepared food for our journey today. If you are ready, we can leave before the day grows hot." Quinn nodded, curious about this special place she had mentioned the previous evening. "Let me just get my canteen." They set out shortly afterward, following a narrow trail that wound upward from the valley floor toward the eastern ridge. Willow moved with the sure-footed confidence of someone intimately familiar with the terrain, occasionally pausing to identify a plant of medicinal value or to point out signs of animal passage that Quinn would have missed entirely. The climb was moderately challenging, requiring careful navigation of steep sections and loose rocks. Quinn found himself admiring not just Willow's physical grace but her evident connection to the landscape. She read the mountain as fluently as any cowboy read the open range, recognizing its patterns and potential dangers with an ease born of lifelong familiarity. After perhaps 2 hours of steady climbing, the trail leveled out onto a small, hidden plateau nestled against the mountainside. Quinn followed Willow through a narrow passage between towering rocks, emerging onto a sight that momentarily took his breath away. Before them spread a secluded meadow, vibrant with late-blooming wildflowers and tall grasses that swayed gently in the morning breeze. A spring bubbled from the rock face at one end, creating a small, clear pool before continuing as a tiny stream that disappeared over the far edge of the plateau. The surrounding cliffs sheltered the meadow from harsh winds while leaving it open to the sky above. "This is my special place," Willow said softly, watching Quinn's reaction. "Few others know of it. I found it as a child, exploring while my mother gathered plants in the lower valleys." Quinn understood immediately why she would treasure such a location. Beyond its natural beauty, the meadow offered something rare in the harsh landscape of the Southwest, a place of gentle abundance, hidden and protected from the world beyond. "It's beautiful," he said simply, knowing that more elaborate praise would be superfluous. Willow led him to a flat rock beside the spring pool, where she spread the cloth she had carried and arranged their simple meal, dried meat, seed cakes, and some kind of dried berries. They sat together, eating in companionable silence as the sun climbed higher, warming the meadow to a pleasant temperature. "The flowers here," Quinn observed after a while, "they look like the ones you sent me seeds for." Willow nodded, pleased by his recognition. "Yes, this is where I gather them when they are ready for medicine. They grow more abundantly here than anywhere else I have found." She reached out, gently touching one of the delicate white blossoms that grew in clusters near the spring. "When I first brought you to our camp, you were burning with fever from the arrow poison. These flowers, prepared properly, help draw that poison out." "So you saved my life twice over," Quinn said. "Once by finding me in the canyon, and again with your medicine." A small smile touched Willow's lips. "Perhaps the Creator saved you, using me as a tool in the work." The humble perspective was characteristic of her, Quinn had noticed, a tendency to view herself as part of a larger pattern rather than the central actor in events. It contrasted sharply with the frontier individualism he had grown up with, where men claimed credit for their successes and blamed luck or others for their failures. "Why did you bring me here today?" Quinn asked after they had finished eating. "You said it was a special place few others know about." Willow's expression grew more serious. "Because here, away from the watching eyes of the camp, we can speak more openly about the questions that lie between us." She met his gaze directly. and because I wanted you to see this place that is precious to me, to understand something of what shapes my spirit." The honesty of her answer touched Quinn deeply. By sharing this private sanctuary, Willow was offering a glimpse of her inner self beyond what daily interactions in camp could reveal. "3 days ago, the council asked what outcome you envisioned between us," she continued. "You said you had no answers. Now I ask you the same question, not as judgment, but as one whose life would be shaped by whatever path we might consider together." Quinn recognized the moment for what it was, an invitation to move beyond vague feelings to concrete possibilities. He considered his words carefully, knowing their importance. "When I first came looking for you," he began, "I wasn't thinking clearly about outcomes. I just knew I needed to see you again to understand if what I felt during my recovery was real." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Now, having been in your camp these past days, seeing your life, your connections to your people in this land, I better understand the magnitude of what I was contemplating." "And does this understanding change what you feel?" Willow asked, her voice quiet but steady. "Not what I feel," Quinn replied honestly, "but it changes how I think about what might be possible." He gestured toward the valley below, invisible from their vantage point but present in both their minds. "Your life has meaning here, purpose, connection, belonging. I would never ask you to leave that behind for an uncertain future in a world that might never truly accept you." Willow considered his words thoughtfully. "And yet, if that was my choice to make." The question startled Quinn. "You would consider leaving your people." "I did not say that," she corrected gently. "I asked what you would think if that was my choice to make. There is a difference between considering possibilities and advocating for them." Quinn nodded, acknowledging the distinction. "If that was your choice, made freely, with full understanding of what it might mean, I would respect it. But I would also fear for you, knowing what you would face." "And the other possibility," Willow pressed. "If you were to consider joining our ways." This was the question Quinn had been wrestling with since his return to the mountains. "I've thought about it," he admitted. "Whether I could learn to live as your people do, to adopt your ways as my own. The truth is, I don't know if that's possible. Not because I'm unwilling to learn, but because I don't know if your people would ever truly accept me, or if my presence would bring them danger they don't deserve." Willow's dark eyes studied him intently. "These are honest answers, Quinn Dawson. Many men would make grand promises without considering the realities." "Promises are easy," Quinn agreed. "Living with the consequences is harder." They fell silent for a moment, the gentle sounds of the meadow buzzing insects, the soft burble of the spring, the whisper of grass in the breeze, filling the space between them. "There is a third path," Willow said finally, "one neither fully of my world nor fully of yours." Quinn looked at her questioningly, uncertain of her meaning. "The borderlands contain many people who live between worlds," she explained. "Mexican villages where Apache sometimes trade, isolated homesteads, where people of different backgrounds have formed their own communities, places where the strict divisions between peoples become more flexible." It was a possibility Quinn hadn't seriously considered. A life neither fully integrated into Apache society nor fully part of white frontier culture, but something in between, carved from the margins where different worlds met. "You've thought about this before," he realized aloud, "before I even returned." Willow nodded, a hint of vulnerability showing through her usual composure. "When you were healing in our camp, I recognized something in you, a questioning spirit similar to my own. I have sometimes wondered if the path the Creator intends for me lies beyond the boundaries of our traditional ways, though I have never spoken such thoughts aloud before now." The admission clearly cost her something, in terms of her usual reserve. Quinn understood its significance, that she had been contemplating possibilities beyond conventional expectations even before his unexpected return had forced such considerations into the open. "Such a life would not be easy," she continued, her practical nature reasserting itself. "Those who live between worlds often find themselves trusted by neither, welcomed fully nowhere. Yet they also serve an important purpose, building bridges of understanding where others see only walls of division. Quinn considered this vision of a shared future, neither fully Apache nor fully white, but something new forged from elements of both worlds. It was both more realistic than complete cultural transformation and more challenging in its lack of established patterns to follow. This third path, he said thoughtfully, would require great courage from both of us, and flexibility. And patience. Yes, Willow agreed simply, all these things and more. Have you spoken to your father about such possibilities? She shook her head, not directly, but my father sees much without needing to be told. I believe he has considered such a future for me, though whether he would welcome it or merely accept it, I cannot say with certainty. The conversation had moved beyond theoretical possibilities to something more concrete, a potential future neither of them had fully articulated until this moment. The reality of it settled between them, demanding consideration rather than immediate response. We should return to camp, Willow said after a while, rising gracefully to her feet. There is much to consider, and decisions need not be made in haste. Quinn stood as well, gathering the remains of their meal. As they prepared to depart, he turned to look once more at the hidden meadow, committing its peaceful beauty to memory. Thank you for sharing this place with me, he said quietly. I understand now why it's special to you. Willow's expression softened. The Apache believed that certain places hold power, not just beauty but spiritual significance. This meadow has always spoken to my heart in ways I cannot fully explain, that you appreciate it as well. She paused, then finished simply, it matters. The return journey to the camp took less time than the ascent, though they walked mostly in thoughtful silence, each processing the implications of their conversation. The third path Willow had described represented both opportunity and challenge, a potential way forward that avoided the most obvious pitfalls of complete cultural conversion while introducing its own unique difficulties. As they approached the camp, Willow paused, turning to Quinn with an expression of quiet determination. Whatever path lies ahead, Quinn Dawson, know that I do not regret the Creator bringing you into my life. Some connections transcend the boundaries humans create between themselves, even when acting upon those connections seems impossible. With that, she continued into camp, leaving Quinn to follow behind, his heart both lighter for her words and heavier with the weight of decisions yet to be made. The fifth day brought a subtle shift in the camp's dynamics. Word of Quinn and Willow's journey to her special meadow had evidently circulated, as such information inevitably did in small communities. While no one commented directly, Quinn noticed the evaluating glances cast their way when they were seen together, the hushed conversations that paused when he approached. Medicine Horse, too, seemed more attentive to their interactions, though he maintained his characteristic reserve. During their morning tea ritual, the healer observed Quinn with penetrating eyes before stating simply, "The heart follows its own wisdom, sometimes before the mind understands the path." The cryptic comment, delivered without further explanation, suggested that the older man was well aware of the developing connection between Quinn and his daughter. Whether he approved or merely accepted its possibility remained unclear. Quinn spent the morning helping several of the men repair damage to a hunting blind that had been partially destroyed during a recent storm. The physical labor provided welcome distraction from the emotional complexities he faced, and the shared work created natural opportunities for cautious rapport building with men who had initially regarded him with suspicion. Running Wolf, the young warrior who had been most openly hostile during the council meeting, worked alongside Quinn, his attitude still reserved but no longer overtly antagonistic. As they lashed branches together to reinforce the structure, he suddenly asked, "Why do white men build permanent dwellings that cannot move with the seasons?" The question seemed genuine rather than confrontational, prompting Quinn to consider it thoughtfully. "I suppose because most white people believe progress means putting down roots in one place, building something that lasts beyond a single lifetime. And this is better than following the natural rhythms of the land," Running Wolf pressed. "Not better," Quinn clarified, "just different. Each approach has its strengths. Your ways allow adaptation to changing conditions and maintain closer connection to the natural world. Our ways provide certain kinds of stability, but can disconnect people from the land that sustains them. Running Wolf seemed surprised by this balanced response. You speak as if both ways have value. Most white men believe only their way is right. I've had reason lately to question many things I once took for granted, Quinn admitted. Your people have survived in this harsh land for generations using knowledge and skills that most white men don't understand or respect. There's wisdom in that which deserves recognition. The young Apache studied him for a moment before returning to his work, but Quinn sensed a slight thawing in his attitude, not friendship, certainly, but perhaps the beginning of grudging respect. In the afternoon, Willow invited Quinn to join her as she taught several young girls about medicinal plants. They gathered at the edge of camp, where Willow had arranged various plants in distinct groupings on a blanket. These are for fever, she explained to her attentive audience, indicating a cluster of dried stems with small yellow flowers. And these for stomach ailments, these for wounds that need cleaning. Quinn sat slightly apart, observing the easy way Willow interacted with the children, her natural teaching abilities evident in how she engaged their curiosity rather than simply instructing. She would ask questions, encouraging the girls to examine the plants closely, to smell them, sometimes even to taste a leaf or root under her careful supervision. Healing knowledge belongs to all the people, she told Quinn later as they gathered the plants after the lesson. In white medicine, I am told, such knowledge is kept by only a few who guard it jealously. That's largely true, Quinn acknowledged. Doctors train for years in special schools, and their knowledge isn't widely shared with ordinary people. Willow shook her head slightly. This seems unwise. What happens when someone falls ill far from these special doctors? They often suffer or die, Quinn admitted, particularly in frontier areas where doctors are scarce. Among the Apache, everyone knows at least the basic healing plants and treatments, Willow explained. More advanced knowledge is held by those with special gifts like my father, but the foundations belong to all. This way, no one is entirely helpless when illness or injury comes. It was another example of the practical wisdom embedded in Apache customs, a distributed approach to essential knowledge that increased community resilience. Quinn found himself increasingly appreciating such aspects of their culture, recognizing efficiencies and adaptations that white society, with its emphasis on specialization and credentialing, often overlooked. As evening approached, an unusual visitor arrived at the camp, a Mexican trader leading 2 heavily laden mules. Quinn recognized him as the same man who had delivered Willow's package to the Barcy weeks earlier. The trader, who introduced himself as Manuel Ortega, was clearly welcome in the camp, greeted with familiarity by several of the Apache men. He quickly established a temporary trading post near the central fire, displaying goods that included cloth, metal tools, coffee, sugar, and other items difficult for the band to produce themselves. "Senor Dawson," Manuel acknowledged with a knowing smile when Quinn approached, "I see my delivery found its mark." "It did," Quinn confirmed. "Thank you again for bringing it." The trader shrugged good-naturedly. "I go between many worlds in my work. Messages, packages, these are small matters that build good relationships." He lowered his voice slightly. "Though I admit I was surprised to find you here. Few white men ever see the inside of an Apache camp except as prisoners." "It's a rare privilege," Quinn agreed, aware of the unusual nature of his situation. "Ah, but perhaps not so surprising after all," Manuel observed, his eyes twinkling as he glanced toward where Willow was helping an elderly woman examine a bolt of bright cloth. "La Señorita is remarkable, educated at the mission school, but returned to her people instead of staying in the white world. She speaks 3 languages and understands many medicines. A special woman." Quinn hadn't known about Willow's mission school education, though it explained her excellent English and her ability to move between cultural contexts with relative ease. It added another dimension to his understanding of her, and perhaps explained her openness to the third path she had described. When Manuel had completed his trading and joined the evening meal as an honored guest, he entertained the gathering with news and stories from his travels. Quinn was struck by how the trader navigated multiple cultural contexts, speaking Apache phrases when appropriate, switching to Spanish for certain expressions, and incorporating English terms when discussing the white settlements. Here, Quinn realized, was a living example of the between worlds existence Willow had described, not fully belonging to any single culture but creating a unique identity that drew from multiple traditions. Manuel clearly faced challenges in this role, as evidenced by the scars visible on his forearms and a certain wariness that never entirely left his eyes despite his jovial manner. Yet he had forged a life of meaning and purpose precisely because of his liminal status rather than despite it. Later, as the camp settled for the night and Manuel prepared his sleeping roll near the fire, Quinn approached him again. "Your life," he began somewhat awkwardly, "traveling between different worlds. Is it a satisfying one?" Manuel studied him thoughtfully, understanding the deeper question behind the words. "It is not an easy life, senor. There are times of great loneliness, when one feels at home nowhere. There are dangers too. Those who distrust outsiders often distrust those who move between worlds even more." He paused, gazing into the fire. "But there are also moments of great beauty and meaning that those who remain always within the boundaries of one world never experience. To see through many eyes, to understand hearts different from your own, this is a kind of wealth that cannot be measured in gold or land. And if a man were to consider such a life, perhaps with a companion who shared that journey," Quinn ventured cautiously. Manuel's expression softened. "Ah, that is different. The greatest burden of the between worlds life is solitude. To share such a journey with one whose heart beats in rhythm with your own, this transforms the experience entirely." He smiled knowingly. "Is this perhaps what you are considering, my friend?" Quinn nodded, not bothering to deny what was evidently clear to the perceptive trader. "It seems impossible in many ways." And yet the heart has its own wisdom," Manuel finished for him. "Listen, senor, in my travels I have seen many things that the world calls impossible, Apache and white living peacefully as neighbors. Mexicans and Americans finding common ground despite the recent war, even occasionally love that crosses the boundaries others declare inviolable." He leaned forward slightly. "The world is changing. Old ways are dying, new possibilities emerging. Those who can navigate these changes with open hearts will find paths that others cannot see." The conversation provided Quinn with much to consider, as he retired to his sleeping place outside Medicine Horse's wickiup. Manuel represented a living example of the third path Willow had described, evidence that such an existence was possible, if challenging. The trader's obvious respect for Willow also suggested that he might prove a valuable ally if Quinn and Willow were to attempt such a journey together. As Quinn drifted toward sleep, gazing up at the stars visible through the tree branches overhead, he reflected that his remaining time in the camp was dwindling rapidly. 2 more days until the council's deadline arrived. 2 more days to determine whether the connection he and Willow had formed could, or should translate into a shared future that neither of them had anticipated when their paths first crossed. The 6th day dawned with an unseasonable chill, the first hint of winter's approach touching the hidden valley. Quinn emerged from his sleeping furs to find the camp already stirring, preparations underway for what appeared to be a significant hunting expedition. White Horse approached as Quinn was folding his bedding. "We go to hunt deer today," the older man explained. "The signs show a large herd has moved into the valley to the north. Before the winter comes, we must secure meat to dry and store." "Would my help be welcome?" Quinn asked, uncertain of his status in such an important tribal activity. White Horse considered the question briefly before nodding. "Running Wolf says you handled yourself well during the repair work. Extra hands are always useful in a large hunt." He paused, then added with the hint of a smile, "Besides, Medicine Horse says it would be good for you to participate in gathering food you have been eating." The invitation represented a meaningful step in Quinn's gradual integration into camp life, not merely tolerated but actively included in essential survival activities. He quickly gathered his minimal hunting gear and joined the group of men preparing near the edge of camp. Running Wolf acknowledged Quinn's presence with a brief nod, then continued explaining the hunting strategy to the assembled men, occasionally using Apache terms that Quinn couldn't follow, but supplementing with hand gestures clear enough for him to understand the basic plan. As the hunting party prepared to depart, Quinn noticed Willow approaching. She carried a small leather pouch, which she handed to her father with what appeared to be specific instructions. Medicine Horse nodded gravely before securing the pouch in his hunting bag. Then, to Quinn's surprise, she approached him directly. "Be careful today," she said quietly. "The first winter hunt often brings unexpected challenges." "I will," Quinn assured her, touched by her concern. "Your father seems well prepared." "He is a skilled hunter as well as a healer," Willow acknowledged. "But the mountains can be unpredictable this time of year." She hesitated, then added more softly, "Return safely, Quinn Dawson. There is much yet for us to discuss." The simple statement carried weight beyond its words, an acknowledgement that their conversation in the meadow had opened possibilities that remained unresolved. Before Quinn could respond, she had turned away, rejoining the women who were preparing for the hunter's return with successful kills. The hunting party, consisting of 12 men including Quinn, set out shortly afterward, following game trails that wound through increasingly dense forest as they moved northward from the camp. Quinn found himself positioned in the middle of the group, paired with an older hunter who introduced himself as Gray Fox. "First hunt with Apache?" Gray Fox asked as they walked, his English heavily accented but comprehensible. "Yes," Quinn confirmed, "though I've hunted deer before in other territories." The older man nodded. "Apache hunting different. We use land, wind, patience, not just good shot." He tapped his temple. "Think like deer, where go for water. Where feel safe, where sleep when tired. Know this, find deer easy." Quinn listened attentively as Gray Fox continued explaining Apache hunting techniques, recognizing that the older man was sharing valuable knowledge rather than making casual conversation. The Apache approach to hunting emphasized intimate familiarity with animal behavior and habitat, treating the hunt as a relationship with the prey rather than simply a pursuit. By midday, the party had reached a high ridgeline overlooking a secluded valley. Through hand signals, Running Wolf directed the hunters to spread out along the ridge, forming a loose semicircle. From this vantage point, Quinn could see the deer herd grazing peacefully in the valley below, perhaps 20 animals, unaware of the hunters positioned above them. Medicine Horse moved silently along the line of hunters, speaking briefly to each man. When he reached Quinn, he explained in a near whisper, "We will drive the herd toward the narrow pass to the east. 6 men will position themselves there for the killing shots. You will remain with Gray Fox on this ridge as watchers, to signal if the herd changes direction unexpectedly." Quinn nodded his understanding, recognizing that he was being given an important but relatively straightforward role, appropriate for someone participating in their hunt for the first time. He checked his rifle, settled into the rocks beside Gray Fox, and waited. The drive began with distant shouts and the rhythmic beating of drums. The deer herd, spooked, began to move up the valley. It was working perfectly until a massive buck, panicked by the noise, broke away from the main group. Instead of heading toward the pass, it scrambled up the steep slope directly toward the ridge where the watchers were stationed, specifically toward where Running Wolf was repositioning himself to signal the hunters below. The buck, cornered and terrified, didn't flee. It charged. Running Wolf, balanced precariously on a scree slope, tried to bring his rifle to bear, but the loose rock shifted under his feet. He fell backward, his weapon clattering away, leaving him defenseless as the 300-pound animal lowered its antlers. Quinn didn't think. He didn't wait for Gray Fox's command. He stood up, exposing his position, and whistled sharp and loud. The buck's head snapped toward the new sound. For a heartbeat, it hesitated. That heartbeat was all Quinn needed. He raised his Winchester, tracked the movement, and fired. The shot echoed like a cannon blast in the canyon. The buck collapsed mid-stride, sliding down the shale to come to rest just yards from where Running Wolf lay. Silence descended on the valley. The main herd had scattered, the hunt disrupted. Quinn lowered his rifle, his heart hammering. He looked down at Running Wolf. The young Apache stared back, his chest heaving, looking from the dead buck to Quinn. He gave a single, slow nod, an acknowledgement of a life saved. Part 1: The Feast and the Bond. The hunt had not gone as planned, but thanks to the other hunters in the pass, they still secured enough meat for the winter. But the mood in the camp that night was different. The reserve that had greeted Quinn for 6 days had evaporated. He was no longer just the white guest or the curiosity. He was the man who had acted to save one of their own. During the feast, Running Wolf approached where Quinn sat. He carried the antlers of the buck Quinn had killed. He placed them at Quinn's feet. "You shoot straight, white man," Running Wolf said, the hostility gone from his voice, replaced by a grudging respect. "And you stand when others might sit." Medicine Horse watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction. Later, as the fires burned low, he sat beside Quinn. "My people judge a man by his actions, not his skin," the healer said softly. "Today you showed them your heart. It is a brave heart, but bravery alone does not solve the riddle of two worlds." Quinn looked across the fire to where Willow sat. She was watching him, her eyes shining with relief and something deeper, pride. "No," Quinn agreed. "It doesn't, but it gives us ground to stand on while we figure it out." Part 2: The Seventh Day. The morning of the 7th day, the day of decision, dawned cold and clear. The council gathered again at the central fire pit. This time, Quinn did not feel like a defendant on trial. He felt like a man presenting a case for his life. "The days are finished," White Horse announced. "Quinn Dawson, you have walked among us, you have hunted with us, you have kept our laws, now you must speak your mind. What path do you choose?" Quinn stood, he looked at Willow, then at her father, then at the council. "I cannot ask Willow to return with me to my world," Quinn began, his voice steady. "In the towns and the ranches, she would be treated with hatred because of her heritage. I would not subject her to that indignity, nor would I ask her to sever her connection to her spirit." He paused, turning to Medicine Horse. "And I cannot stay here. As much as I have come to respect your ways, I am a danger to you. My presence here invites the army or men like my foreman to come looking. I will not be the reason your sanctuary is discovered." A murmur went through the council. "Then you choose to leave alone?" Tall Elk asked. "No," a voice rang out. Willow stepped forward. She did not look down. She stood tall, wearing her finest deerskin dress, the one patterned with the blue beads of the sky. "There is a third path," she said, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the circle. "The trader Manuel spoke of it. There are places in the borderlands, south of the Gila, in the Sierra Madre, where the lines between peoples are not so sharply drawn, where a man and a woman can build a life on their own terms." She turned to her father. "I choose to go with him, not to his world and not staying in ours. We will make a new world." The silence was absolute. To leave the band was a kind of death. Medicine Horse stood slowly. He walked to his daughter and placed his hands on her shoulders. He looked into her eyes, then looked at Quinn. "I saw this in the smoke long ago," the healer said, his voice thick with emotion. "I saw that my daughter would walk a path I could not follow. She has the spirit of the wind, she cannot be caged." He turned to Quinn. "You have shown you will protect her body with your strength. Will you protect her spirit with your love?" "With everything I have," Quinn vowed, "until my last breath." Medicine Horse nodded. "Then go, take horses, take supplies. Go with the blessing of the Chiricahua." Part 3: The Threat. They spent the morning packing. It was a bittersweet flurry of activity. Willow said her goodbyes to the women she had grown up with, to the children she had taught. Quinn checked the cinches on Chance and Willow's pinto, loading the pack mule Medicine Horse had insisted they take. By mid-afternoon, they were ready. The entire camp gathered to see them off. "Ride south through the slot canyons," White Horse advised Quinn, shaking his hand. "Stay off the high ridges." They mounted up. Quinn looked at Willow. She was crying silently, but her jaw was set. She was leaving everything she knew for a hope and a promise. They turned their horses toward the valley entrance. Crack! A rifle shot echoed off the canyon walls. Dirt kicked up just inches from Chance's hoof. "Scatter!" Quinn roared, grabbing the bridle of Willow's horse as the camp erupted into chaos. "Apache, we got him!" A voice bellowed from the ridge above the valley entrance. Quinn looked up. Lined along the eastern rim were 6 riders. And in the center, looking down with a repeater rifle, was Harlan Buckley. "I knew it," Harlan shouted down, his voice distorted by the distance. "I knew you were a traitor, Dawson. Leading us right to a nest of rats." "Get the women and children back," Quinn yelled to White Horse, drawing his revolver. "Get them into the caves." The Apache noncombatants scrambled for the safety of the rear caves as the men took up defensive positions. Bullets began to rain down into the camp. "Surrender, Dawson," Harlan screamed. "Give up the girl and we might let you hang quick." Quinn looked at Willow. Her eyes were wide, but she wasn't frozen. She was looking at the terrain. "We can't fight them from the low ground," Quinn grated out. "And if we stay, they'll siege the camp until the army comes." "The waterfall," Willow said suddenly, pointing to the northern cliff face where the spring originated. "There is a path behind the water. It is steep, treacherous. Horses cannot make it." "We aren't leaving the horses," Quinn said grimly. "If we are on foot, we're dead." He looked at the ridge. Harlan and his men were focused on the main cluster of wickiups. They hadn't seen the narrow goat trail that led up the western slope, the third path out of the valley. "We have to draw them off," Quinn said. "If they chase us, they leave the camp alone." "Quinn, no," Willow pleaded. "That is suicide." "It's a distraction," he corrected. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out the medicine pouch she had given him. He tied it securely to his belt. "Do you trust me?" She looked at him, the chaos of the attack screaming around them. "Yes." "Then ride for that western trail. Don't look back until you hit the timberline." "And you?" "I'm going to give Harlan what he wants." "A target." Quinn spurred Chance. He didn't ride away from the shooters. He rode into the center of the clearing, waving his hat. "Harlan," he screamed, "you want me? Come and get me, you son of a bitch." He fired 3 shots at the ridge. They were impossible shots, meant only to draw attention. It worked. Every gun on the ridge turned toward the crazy cowboy in the center of the valley. "Kill him," Harlan roared. Bullets tore up the ground around Chance. The horse reared, screaming. Quinn fought the reins, wheeling the horse around and galloping hard toward the western slope, right behind Willow. "They're running," Harlan yelled. "After them, forget the camp, get the traitor." Quinn risked a glance back. The riders on the ridge were mounting up, scrambling to find a path down to pursue them. He had bought the camp time, now he just had to survive. Part 4. Beyond the boundaries. The chase through the mountains was a blur of terror and adrenaline. Willow led them through terrain that no horse should have been able to cross, narrow ledges with 1,000-foot drops, scree slopes that shifted like water, thickets of thorny mesquite that tore at their clothes. Harlan and his men were relentless, but they didn't know the land. They were trackers, not mountaineers. Willow led them into the labyrinth, a section of slot canyons so narrow the sun barely touched the floor. The echoes of the pursuers' horses bounced off the walls, making it sound like an army was behind them. "Here," Willow shouted, pulling her pony to a halt before a sheer rock face. "It's a dead end," Quinn yelled, looking behind them. "No," Willow dismounted. She pulled aside a curtain of thick ivy growing on the rock. Behind it was a fissure, dark and cool, the hidden way. My ancestors used it to escape the Spanish. They led the horses into the darkness. It was tight. Quinn's knees scraped the stone on both sides, but they fit. They moved through the pitch-black tunnel for what felt like hours, guided only by the flow of air. They emerged on the other side of the mountain range, high above the desert floor, facing south. The sun was setting, painting the vast, empty badlands of Mexico in shades of purple and gold. They listened. The wind whistled through the rocks. A hawk cried, but there were no hoofbeats, no shouting. They had lost them. Quinn slid from his saddle, his legs shaking. He leaned against Chance, gasping for air. Willow stood beside him, looking back at the mountain that hid her people. "They are safe," she whispered. Harlan followed us, the camp is safe. Quinn reached out and took her hand. And so are we. She turned to him, her face was scratched, her dress torn, but she was whole. We have nothing, she said, looking at the empty desert ahead. No home, no people. Quinn reached into his shirt and pulled out the wooden bead medicine horse had given him, the prayer for safe journeys. He placed it in her hand. We have this, he said, and we have the seeds. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead as the first stars appeared over the borderlands. We'll build a home, he promised. Somewhere the lines don't matter. Epilogue. Sonora, Mexico, 1882. The adobe house sat on a hill overlooking a green valley where a stream wound its way toward the village. It was a strange house, built with the thick walls of Mexican architecture, but with the open, circular flow of an Apache wickiup and a sturdy American-style corral out back. In the garden, white flowers bloomed in clusters of 3, the healing ghost flowers, thriving in the shade of the mesquite trees. Quinn Dawson wiped his hands on a rag as he walked up from the corral. He was older now, the lines around his eyes deeper, his skin darkened by the southern sun. He walked with the easy gait of a man who has stopped looking over his shoulder. Papa. Papa. A little boy, perhaps 4 years old, with wild black hair and gray eyes, ran from the garden. He held up a lizard triumphantly. Look, he is fast, but I am faster. Quinn laughed, scooping the boy up, just like your mother. Let him go, Leo. He has a family to get back to. Willow stepped out onto the porch. She wore a simple cotton dress, but around her neck was a necklace of blue beads. She smiled as she watched them, her husband and her son, living in the world they had carved out of the borderlands. Manuel the trader sat on the porch rail, sipping a cool drink. He stopped by every few months to bring news and trade goods. They are still telling stories about you up north, you know, Manuel said, watching Quinn approach. The cowboy and the healer who vanished into the mountain. Some say you turned into eagles. Quinn set his son down and put his arm around Willow's waist, looking out over the valley that belonged to no one and everyone. Let them tell stories, Quinn said softly, pressing a kiss to his wife's temple. We're busy living the truth. Willow rested her head on his shoulder, her hand covering his where it rested on her waist. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the same crimson light that had once signaled an end, but now every day promised only a beginning.